Hey there, and welcome back. If you are already lying down, already warm, already letting the day loosen its hold on you one finger at a time, then you are exactly where you need to be, and there is nothing more for you to do tonight but stay there and listen. This is going to be a slow evening, and a wet one, and a kind one. It is for anyone who has ever wanted to be somewhere solid and old and safe while the weather did its worst outside, somewhere with thick walls and banked fires, and a roof that has kept the rain out for 200 years, and means to keep it out tonight as well. I am going to take you to a house like that, and we are going to stay in it from the moment the light fails until the moment the last person in it falls asleep. You do not have to hold on to anything, or remember anything, or follow any thread too closely. You can let it wash over you the way the rain is going to wash over the house. And by the time the night is deep, one of the oldest people under that roof is going to sit alone by a dying fire and open a small drawer that has not been opened in a very long time, and take out something she has kept there, and hold it. And we are going to be there with her when she does. Before we go in out of the weather, let me say one quiet thing, and then I will not interrupt the evening again until the very end. If you find that these long, slow nights are the kind of thing that helps you let go and drift off, you are always welcome to follow along, so that whenever the rain starts up and you want a warm house to fall asleep in, one is here waiting for you. I would love to know where you are listening from tonight, and what the weather is doing outside your own window, and what hour it has reached where you are, whether it is late evening or the small hours or somewhere just before dawn. Leave a word below if you feel like it, and I will look through them, because there is something companionable in knowing that all across the world, in all those different places and hours, a great many of us are lying in the dark, being carried off to the same rainy house together. That is all. That is the last I will step outside the story. From here on, the house is the only world there is. Picture this. A carriage is coming up a long gravelled drive in the rain, and it is nearly dark. The lamps on the carriage are lit, 2 soft coins of yellow swinging as the wheels find and lose the ruts, and the light of them catches the rain as it comes down, so that the whole world ahead is a moving grey curtain shot through with falling silver. The horses are wet to the shoulder and steaming faintly, and their heads are down against the weather, and the coachman up on the box has the collar of his greatcoat turned to his ears and his hat streaming at the brim. It has been raining since the middle of the afternoon, the steady autumn rain of the West Country, not a storm, nothing violent, just an enormous grey patience coming down out of a low sky, and the drive has turned to a ribbon of wet stone and puddle that throws the last of the daylight back up at you. On either side, the parkland is dissolving into dusk, great dark shapes of oak and cedar standing about in the wet, a low mist lying in the hollows, a lake somewhere off to the left, the colour of pewter. And then the drive curves, the way these drives always curve, so that the house arrives all at once rather than growing slowly, and there it is ahead of you through the rain. The house, lit up, waiting. It stands up out of the dusk with a kind of enormous settled calm, a long grey front of dressed stone, 3 stories of it, with the balustrade along the top against the sky, and tall ranks of windows going up the face of it, and behind perhaps a third of those windows there is light. Warm light, the unmistakable low golden glow of fire and candle and oil lamp seen from outside on a wet night, which is one of the oldest and most powerful sights there is for pulling at the human heart, because for the whole of our history it has meant the same thing. It has meant that other people are in there, and they are dry, and they are warm, and if you can only get to them, you will be dry and warm as well. The great door at the top of a short flight of steps is shut against the weather, but a lamp burns in a bracket beside it, and the fanlight above it glows, and you can see, even from here, even through the rain, that the house is expecting you. Somebody indoors has heard the wheels on the gravel. Somewhere behind that grey front, A bell is being rung, and a servant is setting down whatever he was holding, and the slow machinery of arrival is beginning to turn. The carriage draws up at the foot of the steps, and for a moment nobody moves, and there is only the sound of the rain on the carriage roof, and the blowing of the horses, and the small ticking of the cooling lamps. Then the door of the house opens, and the glow spills down the wet steps to meet you, and a footman is coming down with a great black umbrella held up, and behind him in the doorway there is the tall, dark shape of the butler, and beyond the butler, the hall. And that is where we are going. Out of the rain and the failing light and the enormous grey evening, up the steps under the umbrella with the water drumming on the stretched silk of it, across the threshold, and in. Let the door close behind us. Let the weather become a thing that is happening to the outside of these walls and no longer to us. We are inside now, and we are going to stay inside until morning. The hall takes you the way a warm bath takes you, all at once and all over. After the grey outside, it is almost too much to hold. The height of it first, 2 stories rising to a ceiling you have to tip your head back to find, and then the light, and then the smell, and then the sheer enveloping warmth of a great household at the end of the day with its fires all lit. This is the entrance hall, the space the whole plan is arranged around, and in a dwelling of this age and this size it is a hall in its own right, and not merely a passage. There is a fire burning in a stone fireplace, big enough to roast an ox in, a real fire of logs the length of a man's arm, and it has been burning long enough to have built a deep bed of embers that throws a red pulsing heat out across the flagstones. The floor is stone, worn smooth and slightly dished in the middle by 300 years of feet, and it is scattered with old rugs gone soft and dim with age. A broad oak staircase rises out of the far side of the hall and turns at a half landing, and goes up into the shadow of the upper floors, and its banister is black with age and polish and the grip of 10,000 hands. And everywhere, up the walls, into the dimness, there are the things such a place accumulates over the centuries, and never quite gets rid of. The dark oil portraits of people long dead, a stag's head, a case of old weapons, a case clock ticking with a slow, deep tock that you feel more than hear. The butler takes your arrival in hand with the quiet, total competence of a man who has done this several thousand times and will do it several thousand more. He is somewhere past 50, in black with white hair brushed close and a face schooled to a pleasant blankness that gives nothing away. And he is the still centre of the whole household, the one person who knows where everybody is and what everybody is doing and what time everything must happen. He murmurs a word of welcome, unhurried, and behind him the footman is already easing you out of your wet outer coat, which is heavy with the rain and cold to the touch, and the moment it comes off your shoulders you feel how warm the hall truly is, how the fire has been quietly soaking heat into the stone all day. Your coat is borne away to be dried. Your wet hat goes with it. A maid appears from somewhere with a soft cloth for your face and hands, and you understand that you are being received, that a great many small kindnesses are being done for you at once by people who have made an art of doing them without seeming to, and that all you are required to do is stand here in the firelight and be warmed and be glad. And this is worth pausing on for a moment before we go any deeper into the evening, because it is the thing that most separates this world from ours. Under this roof, at this hour, there is a whole population of people whose work it is to make the evening happen. You did not think about your coat once it left your shoulders. You will not think about the fire, which will be fed all night by a hand you never see. You will not think about the candles that will be lit as the dark comes on, or the water that will be heated for you, or the bed that is at this moment being warmed for you upstairs with a covered pan of coals run between the sheets. All of it is being taken care of, below stairs and behind doors and up back staircases you will never climb, by a household of servants who have been at their work since before it was light this morning and will be at it until well after you are asleep. We are going to go down and meet them later when the family is at dinner and the real heat of the servants' evening is on. But stand here first in the warm hall with the rain a distant hiss against the tall windows and the fire ticking and settling, and simply feel the size of the comfort that is being built around you. It is the comfort of being expected. It is the comfort of arriving out of the weather into a place that was made ready for you before you came. And since we are standing in the great hall, at the very heart of it, let me tell you a little about the building itself, the actual stone and timber of it, because it is not one house but many, grown together over centuries into the single settled thing we walked into out of the rain. A seat like this is never built all at once. It grows the way a tree grows, ring upon ring, each age adding to what the last age left, so that to walk through it is to walk through time. The oldest part of it, if you know where to look, is very old indeed. A low, thick-walled core down at one end, with small, deep windows and enormous beams black with age, the remains of a rougher, older, half-fortified house that stood here when the country was a more dangerous place, when a man's home had to keep out more than the weather. Around and over that old core the centuries built. A later, easier, more gracious age threw out new wings and taller windows, and panelled the rooms in oak, and made a house meant no longer for defence, but for living well. And then, perhaps 4 or 5 generations back, in a calmer and richer century, the family did what so many did, and gave the whole rambling old place the handsome, even front we came in by, the long grey classical face of dressed stone with its rows of tall sash windows and its balustrade against the sky, so that from the drive it looks all of a piece, all one serene and ordered age, though behind that front the old crooked heart of it still stands. The low-beamed rooms and the twisting passages and the odd steps up and down where one century was joined to another. And in this present age, the age of the family sleeping here tonight, more has been added again, out at the back and the sides where it does not spoil the view, the wings of service rooms, the conservatory, the whole apparatus of a modern great establishment. So the building we move through is a kind of living record of everything it has been, a body that has grown and changed and been added to for 400 or 500 years, and is still, slowly, growing. And there is a deep steadiness in that, in sleeping tonight inside a thing so much older and more enduring than any single life, a thing that was here long before this family, and will very likely stand long after them, taking the same rain, holding the same warmth, keeping the same watch over the same acres, age after age after age. The family is not in the hall. At this hour, an hour or so before dinner, they are scattered through the warm rooms, doing the quiet things that fill the gap between the end of the useful day and the summons of the dinner gong, and the butler, having seen you thawed and dried, moves now to take you to them. He lifts a branched candlestick from the hall table, though the hall itself is lit, because the passage ahead is not, and he goes before you with the little cluster of flames held up, and you follow him out of the great warm room and into the body of the house. And here the character of it changes. The hall was public, grand, made to impress an arriving guest. What lies beyond it is private and worn and lived in, a long panelled passage with doors opening off it, the panelling gone the colour of dark honey in the candlelight, the floorboards creaking companionably underfoot, a strip of drugget laid down the middle to save the wood. From behind one closed door comes the sound of a piano being played, not performed, just played, someone running through a phrase and stopping and running through it again. From behind another comes the murmur of a voice reading aloud. The whole interior is faintly, warmly occupied, full of small human sounds held inside thick walls while the rain comes down outside, and the butler leads you toward the one door with the most light spilling from beneath it, and rests his hand on the handle, and opens it, and there they are. The drawing room is the warm heart of the upstairs house, and stepping into it out of the dim corridor is like stepping into the inside of a lit lantern. It is a long, high, handsome room running along the front of the building, and 3 tall windows look out over the park, though tonight the park is gone, and the windows are black mirrors streaming with rain, holding nothing but the reflection of the interior itself, doubled and swimming in the wet glass. The curtains have not yet been drawn. That is a small evening ceremony still to come. For now the room simply glows against the darkness, pressing on the other side of the panes, and the rain runs down the glass in long wavering threads that catch the firelight and carry it downward in little moving sparks. There is a fire here too, a coal fire in a marble chimney-piece, banked high and burning clear, and before it, arranged with the unconscious ease of people who have sat in the same places every evening of their lives, is the family. Let me introduce them to you, because we are going to spend the night in their company, and it is pleasant to know whose roof you are sleeping under. In the best chair nearest the fire sits the mistress of the household, a woman in her middle 50s, handsome and upright, with grey coming into her dark hair, and a face that has settled over the years into lines of good humour and command. She has run this household for 30 years, since she came to it as a young bride who did not know one end of a still room from the other, and she runs it now the way a captain runs a ship that has long since stopped needing to be told what to do by presence more than by order. On her lap is a piece of needlework she is not really attending to. Across from her, in his own chair, with a newspaper 3 days old brought up from the town, sits the master, older than his wife by some years, a big, slow, deliberate man gone comfortable in the body, who spent the day out in the wet about the business of the estate, and came in an hour ago chilled to the bone, and is only now, in the heat of this fire, feeling properly warm again. He does not say a great deal. He never has. But the house turns on him none the less, on his land and his name and his long patient stewardship of both. And when he does speak, the room listens. There are grown children present too, home for the season, and they give it its brightness. There is the elder daughter, a young woman of marriageable age, quick and clever, and a little restless, who is the one at the piano we heard from the passage, and who has drifted back to the instrument now, and is picking out something soft with one hand while she talks. There is a son down from his regiment or his rooms in town, long-legged and easy, sprawled in the manner of young men in a chair that was not built for sprawling, teasing his sister and being teased in return. And there is an older presence too, half in the firelight and half out of it, in a high-backed chair set a little apart, a very old lady, the master's mother, the grandmother of the house, wrapped in a shawl, with her hands folded on the head of a cane, so still that when you first came in you might have taken her for asleep. She is not asleep. Her eyes are open and moving, and they take in everything, and she misses nothing that happens in this room, though she says little. She was born, this old woman, in the last years of the previous century. She remembers things no one else beneath this roof can remember. She is the one who, much later tonight, is going to open the small drawer. But that is hours away yet, and for now she sits and watches her son and her grandchildren in the firelight, and is content. And the rain runs down the black windows behind them all. You are made welcome without ceremony, drawn into the circle of the firelight, given the best of the warmth. There is a little talk of the road and the weather, the ordinary kind talk of arrival, and then the family lets you settle, because they are country people, and they understand that a guest come in out of such an evening wants chiefly to sit quietly and be warm, and does not want to be worked at. So you sit, and the fire ticks, and the daughter's soft playing goes on under the conversation, and the old grandmother watches from her chair, and outside the tall streaming windows the last grey light dies entirely out of the sky, and the night comes down in earnest over the park. And at some point, without anybody quite marking the moment, it is fully dark outside, and the room has become an island, a bright, warm, occupied island, floating in a great black sea of wet countryside, with not another light for a mile in any direction, and the rain coming down over all of it, over the woods and the lake and the empty lanes and the sleeping villages, and only this one home lit and awake and full of people in the middle of it all. Then a housemaid comes in to draw the curtains, and it is worth watching her do it, because it is one of those small evening rites that this whole world was made of. She goes to each of the tall windows in turn and reaches up and pulls the heavy hangings across, and they are proper curtains, thick and lined and interlined, falling in deep folds to pool on the floor, made to keep out the cold that comes off a great sheet of glass on a wet night. And as each pair is drawn together, the black streaming window behind it vanishes, and the night is shut out a little more, and the room grows smaller and warmer and more enclosed, until the last of them meets in the middle and the outside world is gone entirely, sealed away behind woolen shutter, and the room is complete unto itself, a warm gold box with the family inside it and the fire in the middle and the storm locked out. The maid pokes the fire and adds coal and slips out again, and now the evening can properly begin. It is worth pausing here, while the family settle into the evening, to notice a thing so ordinary to the people who live here that not one of them gives it a thought, and so wholly gone from our own lives that we can barely imagine it, the daily labour of making light. The place does not simply become bright at dusk the way ours do, at the flick of a finger. Every gleam in it tonight has to be made, by hand, in advance, and tended all evening, and it is one of the great invisible works of the household, begun in the afternoon, and going on still, one chamber after another, as the grey dies out of the sky. All through the day, in the still room and the lamp room, the maids have been at the patient business of it, trimming the blackened wicks, filling the reservoirs with oil, polishing the smoke off the glass chimneys until they shine, setting out fresh candles in the sconces and the candlesticks, so that when the dark comes everything shall be ready. And now, as the dark does come, a footman goes quietly with a taper from one to the next, and one by one he wakes them all to flame. Follow him for a moment, for it is a lovely thing to watch. He touches his taper to the wick of a lamp and turns the little wheel, and a soft yellow flame springs up and steadies behind its glass and throws its warm circle onto the table beneath. He lights the candles in their branches on the chimney-piece, and their small flames catch and lean and settle. He kneels to the fire and coaxes it higher. And as he moves through the ground floor, from the hall to the drawing-room to the dining-room, he leaves behind him a rising tide of gold, chamber after chamber waking out of the grey dusk into warm living gold, until the whole ground floor glows and the black windows fill with the reflection of it. There is nothing harsh anywhere in it, no flat white glare such as we live under, only these dozens of small separate living flames, each one throwing its own soft moving circle, pooling on the tables and leaving the corners in a gentle gloom, so that each becomes a place of warm centres and soft shadowed edges, and every face in it is lit from below and from the side by moving flame, and softened and made kind. It is a light that flatters and gentles everything it touches, a glow our own homes have entirely lost, and it is worth holding in your mind as you drift, this dwelling full of small tended fires, glowing gold against the wet dark, made and kept alight by hand. But before dinner there is a thing that must happen, and it is a thing so foreign to how we live now that it is worth going up the stairs to see, because it tells you more about the shape of this life than almost anything else. The family are going to dress for dinner. It is not yet the hour, but the light is changing toward it, and one by one they will drift up to their rooms to be made ready. To sit down to dinner in the clothes you have worn all day, the clothes you rode out in, or worked in, or lounged in, would be, in this household, in this year, very nearly unthinkable. The evening is a different country from the day, and you cross into it by changing your clothes, and the changing is not a small matter of pulling on a fresh coat. It is a whole quiet operation, and it needs, for the master and mistress at least, another person entirely to accomplish. So let us follow the mistress up. She rises from her chair by the fire, and takes a chamber candlestick from the side table, and goes up the great dim staircase we saw from the hall, up past the half landing where a tall window would show the park if it were not black and curtained, up to the bedroom floor where the passages are quieter and colder, and lit only by the candle in her hand, and by the low light coming from the open door of her own room. And in that room a fire has been lit an hour since, so that it is warm and waiting, and her lady's maid is there, a woman who has been with her for 20 years and knows her mistress's clothes and hair and moods better than anyone alive, and what follows is a slow, practised, wordless collaboration between the two of them, the day dress unfastened down its long row of hooks and eyes and lifted away, the evening gown brought out and settled over the shoulders and fastened up again, the hair taken down and brushed out long and grey, and then pinned up afresh into its evening shape, a little jewellery brought from a box, a shawl chosen against the draughts of the dining room. It takes the best part of an hour. It is done every single evening, and it is done not for a party, not for guests, beyond the one quiet traveller by the fire, but simply because this is what the evening is. This is the boundary you cross to enter it, and no one under this roof would think of doing otherwise. The master, in his own dressing room along the passage, is being turned out likewise by his valet out of the mud-splashed clothes of the estate and into the sober black of an evening at home. And when they come down again they will be, in some small but real way, transformed, made into their evening selves, ready for the one great fixed ceremony that anchors the whole day and around which everything else arranges itself. Dinner. While the family are being dressed, the busiest stretch of the whole day is reaching its height in a part of the household you have not seen, and, as a guest, never will. Come down with me now, away from the warm carpeted rooms above, down a plain door in the panelling and a steep stone-back stair into the working underworld on which the entire comfort of it all is built. Down here there are no rugs and no portraits. There are whitewashed walls and flagged floors, and the light of tallow and oil, and a great deal of noise and heat and hurry, because the hour before dinner, in a kitchen, is the hour when everything must happen at once. The kitchen is a huge vaulted room, and it is the hottest place in the building by a wide margin. At the centre of one wall is the range, a black iron monster kept burning from before dawn until late at night, and in front of it, on a spit turned by a small trembling mechanism, a joint is roasting and throwing off a smell that fills the whole basement and drifts faintly all the way up the back stairs to the floors above. The cook stands at the middle of it all, red-faced and formidable, a woman who rules this hot kingdom as absolutely as the mistress rules the rooms above, and at this hour she is at the very stretch of her powers, because a dinner of many courses must all be brought to readiness at once, and none of it can be allowed to spoil in the waiting. There are pots at the simmer along the range, and sauces being whisked, and a fish being watched, and a soup being kept just below the boil. And around her the kitchen maids and the scullery maid move at a half run, fetching and carrying and chopping and scouring, and everyone is hot, and everyone is quick, and the talk between them is short and sharp and purely to the purpose. There is no leisure down here. The leisure is all upstairs. The leisure upstairs is manufactured down here, in the heat, by hands that will be raw and aching long before the family climb up to bed. And spare a thought while the roast turns and the sauces come together for the scullery maid, who is the youngest and lowest of all the household, a girl of perhaps 13 or 14, up since 5:30 this morning, whose whole world is the stone sink in the cold-back scullery and the endless tide of dirty pots and pans that flows toward her all day and will flow hardest of all tonight, after dinner, when everything the cook has used comes down to her to be scoured clean by candlelight in water. She has heated herself. She will be the last soul still working, hours after the family are asleep, her hands wrinkled and burning in the greasy water, and she will be the first awake tomorrow to rake out the ranges and carry the coal and begin it all again. We do not often think about her when we picture places like this. The portraits are all of the people upstairs, but it all ran on her, and on the boy who cleaned the boots and knives, and on the housemaids carrying their heavy cans of hot water up flight after flight, as much as it ran on the master's name and the mistress's management. It is worth holding both of those truths in your mind at once on a night like this, the great, beautiful, warm mansion and the cold scullery at the bottom of it, where a tired child is washing pots. They were the same house. They were always the same house. The signal that draws the two worlds together is the gong. When the cook judges that all is ready, word goes up, and the butler, in the hall above, takes up the padded stick and strikes the great brass gong that hangs there, and its deep round note rolls through the whole building, up the stairs and along the passages and into every lit chamber, and everywhere it is heard people begin, unhurriedly, to move. The dressed and transformed family come down from their chambers. They gather in the drawing-room for a moment, and then in their small quiet procession they go through to the dining-room, and you go with them, and the last and most important act of the day begins. The dining-room is a grave and splendid place after the bright warmth of the drawing-room, longer and more formal, the walls a deep dark colour that swallows the candlelight, hung with the largest and gloomiest of the family portraits, dead men in armour and dead women in stiff old gowns, looking down out of the shadows on the living family at their meal below. In the centre, the long table, and it is a sight to stop you in the doorway, a lake of white damask, so heavily starched it holds itself in sculptured folds, and down the length of it a glittering cargo of silver and glass and porcelain, and low arrangements of fruit and hothouse flowers grown in the estate's own glasshouses, and, providing the light for all of it, tall branched candelabra of wax candles, several of them, their flames burning perfectly straight and still in the sheltered air of the shut chamber, doubling and trebling themselves in the polished silver and the cut glass, until the whole table seems to burn with a soft steady fire of its own. The family take their places, the master at one end and the mistress at the other, the length of the shining table between them, and behind their chairs the footmen take up their positions, and the butler stands ready at the sideboard, and the meal begins. It is served in the newer fashion, the fashion that has lately come in from the continent and taken hold in houses like this one, in which the dishes are not set upon the table for the diners to help themselves, but are carved and portioned at the sideboard and handed round, course by course, by the footmen. This means a slow and stately procession of separate courses, each arriving in its turn and being offered at your left shoulder by a white-gloved hand. First a soup brought round in its turn, and there may be a choice of two, a clear rich broth on the one hand and a smooth thick one on the other, a hare soup perhaps, dark and winey, taken quietly while the rain, which you cannot hear in this deep shut room, goes on unheard against the far side of the shuttered windows. Then a fish, brought up from the coast packed in ice or straw, and cooked that afternoon, a turbot or a cod's head and shoulders under a rich sauce, or little patties of oyster past warm. Then the maid dishes, the delicate entrees that show off the skill of the kitchen, a dish of cutlets dressed in a particular way, a fricassee, a thing in a sauce that took the cook half the afternoon. Then the great roast that has been turning on the spit all this while, a saddle of mutton or a sirloin carved at the sideboard and passed pink and steaming, and a bird beside it, a boiled turkey, or a brace of partridges from the estate's own coverts, with dishes of vegetables from the kitchen garden, and mashed potatoes, and stewed greens offered in their silver. Then, when the savoury things are cleared, the sweet, the moulded puddings, and the cabinet pudding, and the trembling jellies and creams in their shapes, a tart of preserved fruit from the still room, and after that, when even the sweets are gone, and the cloth is drawn, the dessert proper, the fruit and the nuts and the dried figs set out on the bare polished wood with the wine. And with each course the right wine poured by the butler whose particular province this is, from decanters he has drawn up from the cellar, and let stand and breathe. A light wine with the fish, a fuller one with the meat, something sweet with the pudding, and the port to come for the men when the women have gone. But the food in the end is not really the heart of it, any more than it is the heart of a family dinner now. What matters is the gathering. What matters is that at the close of every single day, no matter the weather, no matter the mood, no matter what has passed between any of them, this family sits down together at this table in the candlelight for an hour or more, and is a family out loud in each other's company. The son teases and is checked and teases again. The clever daughter argues some line of a book she has been reading, and will not give it up. The master says little and eats steadily, and now and then drops one dry remark that sets the young people laughing. The mistress keeps everything moving, turning the talk, drawing out the quiet guest, watching without seeming to that every glass is filled and every plate is right. And at her end of the table the old grandmother sits and eats slowly and listens to it all, the noise and the argument and the laughter of the young, and remembers perhaps other tables, other faces, other dinners in this same room going back and back further than anyone else here can follow. The candles burn down by a finger's width. The footmen come and go on soundless feet, and above and around and outside it all, unheard and unregarded and utterly steady, the rain keeps falling on the great dark house and the black and streaming park. When the last of the sweet dishes has been cleared and the cloth itself is drawn, there comes one of the strangest and most formal of all the evening ceremonies, one that has no equivalent in how we live, and that can seem, looking back, almost comic in its stiffness, though the people who practised it thought nothing of it at all. The mistress catches the eyes of the women at the table, and rises, and the rest rise with her, and they withdraw. They leave the dining table altogether, and go back through to the drawing-room, and the men remain behind at the emptied table with the decanters. For half an hour or so the sexes are simply separated, the women to their coffee and their talk in the warm drawing-room, the men to their port and their own talk in the candle-lit dining chamber, and each half of the party is, for that little while, more at its ease for the absence of its counterpart. Among the men the talk turns to the estate, to the price of wheat and the state of the coverts, and the roof of a tenant's barn that must be seen to. And the master, who was quiet all through dinner, becomes a shade more talkative now among his own sex, and the decanter goes round to the left, always to the left, and the candle flames stand tall over the wreckage of the meal. And by their own fire the women draw close together, and the coffee comes up, and the conversation is easier and quicker and runs to other things, and the daughter goes back to the piano, and the old grandmother is settled again in her chair apart with a cup she holds but scarcely drinks from. And then, after a decent interval, the men come through. They leave the cold formality of the emptied table and rejoin the women in the warm, bright drawing-room, and the party is whole again, and the real evening, the long, soft, candle-lit middle of the evening that is the whole reason we came, can begin at last. The doors are shut against the passages. The fire is built up. The curtains are drawn tight over the black streaming windows, and the rain is only a rumour now, a faint wash of sound on the far side of the wool and glass, felt more than heard. And the family arranges itself, without a word of arrangement, into the shapes of its own long habit. The mistress takes up her needlework in earnest now, close to the branch of candles set at her elbow for the light. The master lowers himself into the deep chair by the fire with a book or the old newspaper, and is asleep behind it within 20 minutes, and no one remarks on it, because he is asleep behind it every evening of his life, and it is one of the settled small comforts of the house. The sun stretches out and watches the fire, and you, the guest, are given the best of the warmth, and asked nothing and allowed simply to be, which is the greatest hospitality of all. There is no hurry in any of it. That is what is hardest to feel across the distance of the years, and what is most worth trying to feel, lying here in the dark. There is nowhere else any of these people could be. There is no other room in the world lit up and calling to them, no message that might come, no diversion beyond the four walls of this one warm room, and the people in it, and the small things they have to do with their hands and their voices to pass the hours until sleep. The evening is not a gap between more important things. The evening is what there is, and so it is entered into slowly and without impatience, and stretched out and inhabited fully, in a way that we who can summon the whole clamouring world into our hands at the touch of a finger have all but lost the knack of. The family sit in their pool of candlelight and sew and read and doze and murmur, and the fire settles and the clock ticks in the corner, and the rain comes down outside on walls that do not care, that have stood through 10,000 such nights and will stand through 10,000 more. Back in the drawing room, among the family in the candlelight, there is a quiet industry going on in the women's laps that is so constant a part of such an evening that you might almost overlook it, and it deserves a closer look, for it is one of the great vanished arts of the domestic world. The mistress and her daughters, as they sit and talk and listen, are almost never simply idle. There is needlework in their laps, and their fingers move at it steadily all evening by the branch of candles set close for the light. It is not one thing, but many. There is the plain useful sewing that never ends in a household, the making and marking and mending of linen, the turning of collars and cuffs, the letting down of a child's hem, the endless quiet repair by which good things are made to last. And there is the finer, ornamental work, the embroidery and the fancy work, a chair cover being worked in wools, a screen, a piece of white work so fine it makes the eyes ache, done purely for beauty and for the pleasure and discipline of doing it well. It was a whole world, this women's work of the needle, and it occupied women of every rank from the Queen down through all the long hours that they sat, and it carried meanings we have half forgotten. A girl's skill with her needle was a real accomplishment, judged and admired, a mark of her patience and her breeding and her worth. The things she made furnished the house and clothed the family, and were handed on. The christening gown used for baby after baby down the generations, the sampler a child stitched and framed, the initials worked into the linen we saw stacked in the housekeeper's press. To sit of an evening with your work in your hands was to be quietly useful and quietly beautiful at once, to turn the long evening of talk and music into something lasting, and there is something deeply peaceful in the very thought of it. The women sitting in the warm light with their heads bent, and their needles going in and out, on and on, making and mending, while the men read and the fire burned and the rain came down, the small steady motion of their hands stitching the whole calm evening quietly together. Presently the daughter is prevailed upon to play, and she does, and the music becomes the soft centre around which the rest of the evening turns. This is one of the great differences of that vanished world, and it is worth dwelling on as her hands find the keys, that if you wanted a tune in a home like this, in a year like this, somebody in the room had to make it. There was no other way. It did not fall out of the air at your command. It was pressed here and now by living fingers out of wood and wire and string, here now in front of you, imperfectly and warmly, and once only, never to be heard again in quite that way. And so the daughters of such houses were taught to play from their childhood, long years of practice at the instrument, so that on evenings like this one, they could give the household its music, and they did, and the giving of it was one of the quiet ways the family made its own happiness out of its own members. Ladlatrus. She plays something soft to begin, a slow air, nothing that asks too much of the late hour or the sleepy room, and the notes drop into the warm quiet one by one and hang there and fade. The firelight moves on the polished wood of the piano. The mistress's needle goes in and out of the cloth in time, almost with the tune, and pauses when the playing pauses. The master sleeps on gently in his chair, and the old grandmother, in her place apart, closes her eyes, not with weariness, but with the particular attention of the very old listening to a tune they have known for 70 years, for she knows this air. She played it herself once in this same room, when her own hands were young and quick, on an older instrument long since gone, and her granddaughter does not know that she is handing the old woman a whole lost evening of her girlhood with every phrase. This is the sort of thing that happens in old houses, quietly, all the time, unspoken. The past and the present sitting in the same firelight, listening to the same tune, only one of them aware that both are there. And when the soft air is done, and there is that little silence that follows music before anyone thinks to fill it, the son asks for something livelier, and she gives it to him, some quick bright reel with a dance in it, and the mood of the room lifts and turns merry, and there is laughing. And the master wakes with a start and pretends he was never asleep, and for a while the drawing-room is as bright and light-hearted a place as any on earth, one warm, loud, happy space, full of a family enjoying itself, sealed in candlelight, with the whole black, wet autumn night shut out beyond the curtains and quite forgotten. Hold that picture for a moment before we move on, because it is the high point of the evening, the fullest and warmest and most wide awake it will be, and everything after this, gently, by slow degrees, is a coming down from it, a settling, a movement towards sleep. But not yet, for now the music and the laughter and the light. Off the drawing-room, through a pair of glazed doors that most nights stay shut, there is a place worth slipping away to while the piano plays, and the mistress, seeing you have not seen it, takes a candle and shows you. It is the conservatory, the glass house built out from the side of the house in the modern fashion, a fashion this family took up a dozen years ago and has been quietly proud of ever since, and stepping into it out of the warm, dry drawing-room is like stepping into another climate entirely. The air changes at once. It is humid here, and green-smelling, thick with the scent of damp earth and leaf, and the heavy sweetness of some flower that opens at night, and it is cooler than the drawing-room, but not cold, for pipes of hot water run beneath the iron staging, to keep the frost from the tender plants through the winter. And all around you in the candlelight, crowding up toward the panes, there are living green growing things, palms and ferns and camellias, and a vine trained along the roof, a whole small jungle held in trust against the English winter, under one thin skin of glass. And on that skin of glass, close over your head, and all down the curving walls, the rain. Here, more than anywhere else indoors, you can hear it and feel it, because here there is nothing between you and the weather but a single thickness of pain. It drums on the roof above you, a steady dense patter, and runs down the great sloping panes in sheets and the candle you carry throws your own reflection back at you from 100 wet black surfaces, so that you stand in a warm green bubble of light with the whole roaring black of the wet night pressing in on every side, held off by nothing but a thin curved wall of panes. It is a strange and lovely place to stand for a minute, between the tame, warm world of the family and the wild, wet world of the park, belonging fully to neither, the tropical air on your face, and the cold rain a hand's breadth away, the flowers breathing their night scent into the dark, and from behind the closed doors, muffled and far, the sound of the piano still going in the lit room you have left. Then the mistress touches your arm and smiles, and you go back in together to the warmth and the music, and the glazed doors close behind you, and the green breathing dark is sealed away again with the rain. There is a place we have not yet entered, and the master, when the merry music has run its course and the mood begins its long, slow turn toward the night, is the one who takes us there. He does not care greatly for a whole evening of sitting in the drawing room, and he has a den of his own to retreat to, a place that is more his than any other in the house, and after a while he heaves himself up out of his chair and lights a candle and asks whether you would care to see the library, and of course you would. It lies across the hall, and it is a deep, quiet brown room, and it smells the instant he opens the door of the particular things libraries have always smelled of: old leather and old paper and wood smoke and a faint dry dust that is somehow not unpleasant, the smell of thousands of books standing quietly in the dark, keeping their contents to themselves. The walls are books from the floor to well above your head, shelf upon shelf of them behind a rail, reached by a set of library steps on a rail of their own, and they are not for show, or not only for show. Some are, it is true, the long uniform runs of sermons and histories bound to match that a place like this accumulates and no one ever opens. But many are read and reread, and this family has been buying and reading books in this quiet place for 150 years, and the shelves hold the drifted evidence of all their separate curiosities, the agricultural manuals the master truly cares about, the novels the daughter smuggles down, the bound volumes of old magazines, the atlases, the county histories, a shelf of poetry gone soft at the spines from handling. A fire burns low in the grate, kept up all evening by a housemaid, though it stood empty, because in a home run like this one, no space the family might enter is ever allowed to go cold, and a single lamp burns on the great leather-topped desk by the window, an oil lamp with a green glass shade that throws a warm pool down onto the blotter and leaves the rest in a soft gloom. The master lights the candles on the chimney-piece and stands for a moment in his own room with the ease of a man who is entirely himself here, and nowhere else quite so much. This is where he does the real work of the estate, the part that happens with a pen. The account books are here, the great ledgers in which 150 years of this land have been reckoned up, rent and harvest and timber and repair, in the hands of his father and his grandfather and now his own, the same slanting columns marching down page after page, the whole long financial memory of a family and its acres. The maps are here too, the estate maps, and he cannot resist unrolling one for you across the desk in the lamplight, a great hand-coloured plan of every field and wood and lane and cottage for miles, each field named with the old names, names that go back to the Saxons and mean nothing any more and are used still, and he sets a weight on each corner and leans over it, and shows you where the house sits in the middle of it all, and where the lake is, and where the home farm is, and where, out at the black rainy edge of the lamplight and the map alike, the land finally gives out at the parish boundary. He is not a talkative man, but he will talk about this quietly, for as long as you will listen, because this is the thing he loves, this ground, this trust handed down to him, and out beyond the curtained window, the rain is falling on every acre of it in the dark. There is a part of the household we have not looked into, a small suite off the far end of the hall that belongs, by old custom, to the men, and on an evening like this the son of the family drifts off to it after a while, and any other man of the party with him, for a game and for the one pleasure that is not permitted in the drawing-room upstairs. This is the billiard room, and next to it, through a low door, its snug companion for tobacco, and together they make a little masculine country of their own that the women of the family rarely enter and never at this hour. Come and look in. The billiard room is a serious place, built for its single purpose, and at the middle of it stands the great table under a long low shade that hangs close over the green cloth and throws all its light straight down, so that the baize glows a deep even green in the gloom, and the rest of it falls away into shadow beyond the rim of it. The balls of coloured ivory sit bright on the green. A rack of cues stands against the panelled wall, and the son leans over the cloth in his shirt sleeves, sighting along a cue, and there is a soft click as one ball strikes another and runs true across the cloth, and a heavier knock as it drops, and then the quiet again, and the slow chalking of the cue, and another shot. It is a game made for exactly this hour, and this mood, unhurried, half attended to, a thing for the hands to do while the mind idles and the talk runs low. And through the low door beside it, the smoking room waits, and it is here, only here, that a man may light his cigar or fill his pipe, for tobacco is banished from all the finer rooms above, and kept to this one, so that its smell shall not cling to the curtains and the gowns above. It is a plainer, darker, snugger place than any upstairs. The walls hung not with silk, but with dark stamped leather or plain panelling that will not hold the smoke, deep-worn leather chairs drawn round a fire, an old carpet, a faint permanent smell of cigar that has soaked into the very walls over the years, and is not unpleasant. The men settle here between shots, and a decanter of spirits and a siphon of soda stand on a side table, and one of them touches a spill to the fire and lights a cigar, and the blue smoke rises slowly through the lamplight and hangs in flat drifting layers under the low ceiling. And here the speech is different again from any we have heard tonight, freer and blunter and easier, the talk of men among men with no woman, by to soften it, running to sport and horses and the doings of the county, to a run with the hounds last week, and a horse one of them is thinking of buying, and the failings of a neighbour they all know. It is not deep conversation, and it does not mean to be. It is the loosening at the end of the day, the settling of men into the animal comfort of warmth and drink and tobacco and idle company, and it goes on quietly here in the smoke and the lamplight while the balls click next door, and it asks nothing of anyone, and it is one of the small good things this life makes room for. In time the cigars burn down, and the last game is played out, and the men knock out their pipes against the bars of the grate and drain their glasses and rise, a shade heavier, a shade sleepier, ready now for their beds, and they put out the great shaded lamp over the table, so that the green cloth goes dark, and they go up through the quiet house, and behind them the little male country of baize and leather and old smoke is left to the night. Far below all this, below even the kitchen and the servants' hall, at the very bottom of the house where the stone stairs run down into the cool and the quiet, there is a place that belongs wholly to the butler, and it is worth going down into for a moment, candle in hand, because it is one of the strangest and most peaceful rooms in the whole building. This is the cellar, the wine cellar, dug into the earth beneath the building, and to come down into it, out of the warm floors above, is to step into another world entirely, a world without weather and almost without time. The air changes as you descend, growing cool and still and even, the same even coolness winter and summer, the temperature of the deep earth itself, which is why the wine is kept here. The sounds of the rooms above fall away behind you. The rain cannot be heard down here at all, There is only the small scrape of your own foot on the stone, and the huge held silence of the underground, and the little wavering light of your candle, throwing itself along the arched brick roof. And all around you, in bay after low brick bay running back into the dark, lies the wine, bottle upon bottle of it, laid on its side in the bins, ranked and sleeping, the accumulated cellar of a family that has been laying down wine for generations. There is a soft grey bloom of dust and cobweb over the necks of the older bottles, undisturbed for years, laid down by the master's father or his grandfather against some far-off day still to come, a daughter's wedding not yet dreamed of, a birth not yet conceived. The butler moves among it all with the ease of long familiarity, for this is his kingdom as much as the pantry above, and he keeps its book, the cellar book, in which every bottle that comes in and every bottle that goes up is entered in his careful hand, so that he knows at any moment exactly what sleeps down here in the cool and the dark. Tonight he has come down to draw what will be wanted tomorrow and to see that all is well, and he goes to a particular bin and draws out a single bottle with great gentleness, cradling it so as not to shake the sediment that has settled in it over its long sleep, and holds it to his candle to read the year, and nods, satisfied, and carries it up, cradled like a sleeping child, to stand overnight in the pantry and settle before its evening comes. It is a quiet thing to witness, this care taken over a single bottle of wine in the silence under the house, and it tells you something about the spirit of the place. Nothing here is hurried, nothing here is careless. The wine is laid down by one generation for another it will never meet, and tended in the meantime, year upon year, in the cool dark, by men who understand that they are only the keepers of it for a while. It is the same understanding that runs through everything here, from the linen worked with the initials of the long dead to the land held in trust and handed down, the sense of a family as a thing that reaches backward and forward far beyond any single life, and of the house as the vessel that carries it through time. The butler climbs the stone stair again with his bottle and his candle, up out of the timeless cool into the warm sleepy house, and behind him the cellar settles back into its enormous patient silence, and the wine sleeps on in the dark under the earth, while the rain falls on the roof 3 floors above. Let us go back up now, all the way up, to the great staircase in the heart of the building, because it is more than a way of getting from one floor to another, and if you pause on it with a candle on the way to bed, you can read, in the faces that climb the wall beside it, the whole long story of the family whose roof this is. The stair rises in broad, shallow flights around the walls of its own tall well, and up that well, hung frame above frame from the panelling to the shadowed ceiling, climb the portraits of the dead, the ancestors of the house, in a rising column of painted faces, going back and back through the generations, and the master or the old grandmother will tell you who they are if you ask, for every one of them has a name and a story, and a place in the descent that ends. For now, in the children asleep in the nursery above, that lowest and oldest, down where the stair begins, hangs a stiff dark portrait of a man in the armour and lace collar of a bygone century, the one who built the first house here, the founder, a hard careful man who got the land in troubled times and held it and passed it on. Above him his son, softer, in the long curled wig and velvet of a more settled age, the one who pulled down the old rough hall and raised the handsome front we came in by, and laid out the park, and planted the great cedars that stand out there now in the rain, planted them knowing he would never sit in their shade for his grandchildren's grandchildren. Higher still, a lady in the powder and pale silk of the last century, an heiress who married in and brought fresh money to tired acres, and saved the whole estate by doing it, and whose good sense is remembered in the family yet, and so on up the wall, face above face, the soldiers and the parsons and the squires and their wives, the clever ones and the foolish ones, the ones who added to the land and the one or two who nearly gambled it away, the whole long chain of them, each a link, each holding the place in trust for a lifetime and handing it on, up and up to the newest frames near the top where the paint is barely dry, and at last to the living family themselves, asleep tonight under the same roof as all these painted eyes. It is a powerful thing to stand among this rising river of ancestors, and it explains, better than anything said aloud, how such a family understands itself and its house. To them the house is not a possession to be enjoyed and spent. It is a trust, a thing received from the dead on the wall, and owed to the unborn in the nursery, to be kept up and handed on undiminished, whatever the cost, whatever the sacrifice, so that the chain shall not break in their hands. The master feels the weight of every one of those painted eyes on him when he goes over his accounts in the library, the whole silent jury of his forebears, watching to see that he does not fail them. And when at last he climbs this stair to his own bed, candle in hand, he climbs past the whole of his own past, the faces sliding by in the little moving light, and he is, for a moment, the living edge of a very long thing, the one link that happens to be alive just now, carrying the flame up the dark stair between the generations that made him and the generations he has made. There is one more place to look into before the house sleeps, and it is the counterpart, upstairs and feminine, of the male world of leather and smoke below. Near the mistress's bedchamber she keeps a small private sitting room of her own, her boudoir, her retreat, the one place in all this great mansion that is entirely and only hers, and though she is not in it now, being still below, its lamp is lit and its fire is kept in, and it is worth a quiet look, for it is here that the true government of the household is carried on. It is a pretty place and a personal one, softer and less formal than the grand rooms downstairs, hung with her own choice of pictures and watercolours, some of them her own girlhood work, scattered with the small treasured things of a long life, a work table by the window, a writing desk, a comfortable chair drawn to the fire. This is where she comes in the mornings, and in stolen half hours through the day, to do the real work that keeps the whole enormous machine of the house turning. For make no mistake, formidable as the housekeeper is below and grave as the butler is, it is this woman who truly runs the house, and she runs it from this small quiet room. Here on the desk are her household books, and they are as carefully kept as any ledger in the library, the weekly reckonings of what the great household spends and eats and uses, checked against the tradesmen's books, nothing escaping her eye. Here she plans the meals and the marketing, and the seasons of the still room. Here she keeps up the vast correspondence that binds the family into the wider web of its kin and its county, the letters to married daughters and distant cousins and old friends, written at this desk in her firm hand by the light of this lamp. And here, too, she keeps the threads of 100 quiet kindnesses that are also her work, and that no ledger records, the knowledge of which cottager on the estate is ill, and wants broth from the kitchen, which old servant needs looking to, which village child is to have a place found for it. All of it, the accounts and the letters and the mercies alike, is governed from this one small warm room, by this one woman, at this desk, and the comfort we have moved through all evening, every glowing fire, and every smooth-run meal, flows in the end from her steady management as much as from her husband's acres. It is the quietest seat of power in the house, and the most complete. There is a small cold closet off the library that we did not open when we were in there, kept locked, and it holds the deepest and driest memory of the whole estate, and it is worth a look by candlelight before we go up, for it is where the family keeps not its money nor its portraits, but its title to the very ground the house stands on. This is the muniment room, The strong vault of the family's papers, a plain vaulted little chamber, lined with shelves and deed boxes and iron chests, and it smells of nothing but old parchment and dust and cold stone. Here, tied in bundles and folded in boxes, laid away in the dark and almost never disturbed, lies the estate set down in ink and wax and skin, the deeds and the conveyances and the marriage settlement, the leases and the rentals and the manorial rolls, the whole legal skeleton of the family's long possession of this land, some of it on parchment so old and stiff and brown that it crackles like a dead leaf, written in the cramped Latin script of clerks dead 500 years, sealed with great discs of cracked wax on faded ribbons. To hold up a candle to those shelves is to look at time itself made into paper. There are documents here older than the house, older than the family's very name in this place, going back to grants made by kings whose bones are dust, each one a link in the unbroken legal chain by which this ground has passed from hand to hand down the years and come at last to the sleeping family upstairs. It is a dry and dusty and unlovely thing, a deed of conveyance next to a portrait or a piece of music, and yet in its way it is the truest root of the whole house, for it is this, these crackling skins in their boxes in the dark that says the land is theirs, that has said so through all the turning of the years, and that will go on saying so, in this same cold little room, long after tonight's sleepers are themselves only names in the oldest of the papers. The candle throws its light along the boxes, each labelled in a different century's ink, and then you take it away again, and the muniment room goes back into its ancient dark, holding the long paper memory of the estate safe and silent, while the family that the papers speak of sleeps on above, and the rain falls on the acres that the papers name. Up above all this, up under the roof at the top of the back stairs, there is a snug small country of its own that the family visits but does not live in, and it is worth climbing up to while the master pores over his maps, because no picture of such a house is complete without it. There are younger children in this house, as well as the grown ones downstairs, 2 of them, a boy and a girl, too young by years to sit up for the late dinner, and they were given their supper hours ago, and brought down to the drawing-room briefly to be kissed and admired, and then carried back up here, to the nursery, which is their whole world, and will be for a few more years yet. The nursery is a low, snug room with a guard about the fire and a rocking horse in the shadows and a rag rug on the floor, and it is presided over by the nurse, an ageless woman, who has raised children beneath this roof for longer than some of the grown ones have been alive, who loves them fiercely and rules them gently, and will one day be pensioned into a cottage on the estate and visited faithfully by the very ones she is now settling into their beds. And they are, by this hour, settled, 2 small beds against the wall, and in each of them a sleeping child, one flung out flat with the abandon of the very young, one curled tight with a fist against the cheek, both of them deep in the enormous headlong sleep of childhood that adults spend the rest of their lives trying and failing to find their way back to. A single nightlight burns, a small flame floating in a saucer of oil, turned low, just enough to push the dark back from the beds so that a child waking frightened in the night will not wake into nothing. The nurse sits by the fire with some mending, keeping her watch, and the rain runs down the one high window, and the 2 children sleep on beneath it, warm and fed and safe and entirely unaware, as children rightly are, of the whole vast machinery of love and labour and money and land that stands between them and the wet cold dark that has been arranged around them since before they were born for the single purpose of keeping them exactly this warm and this secure. They will never remember tonight. It is one of 10,000 identical untroubled nights that will sink together into the warm nameless blur that a happy childhood becomes in the memory. And that, when you think of it, is the whole aim and triumph of a house like this, working through all its flaws at once tonight. That up here, at the top of it, 2 children can sleep so soundly that they will never know they were kept safe at all. Come down now, though, all the way down, past the family floors and past the ground floor and into the basement again, because there is an evening happening down here too, quite separate from the one above, and it has reached, by this hour, its own settled centre. The family have dined. Now the servants dine. In the servants' hall, a long plain whitewashed room with a great scrub deal table down the middle of it. The household sits down to its own supper, and after the long hard push of the family's dinner, there is a loosening here, a warmth, that is every bit as real as the glow in the rooms above, and in some ways more so, because these people spend far more of their lives together than the family upstairs ever will. Here is the whole population of the below-stairs world gathered at last in one room, the butler at the head of the table and the housekeeper at the foot, the 2 of them keeping a state among the lower servants nearly as grand as the master and mistress keep above, and ranged between them in strict unspoken order the footman and the lady's maid and the cook, and then the housemaids, and then at the far cold end the kitchen maids and the boot boy and the little scullery maid, lowest of all, eating quickly, watched over, half asleep already on the bench. There is hierarchy here, sharp and real, every bit as fixed as anything upstairs, and yet there is fellowship too, and the 2 live side by side without contradiction. There is talk, and some laughter, held a little in check by the presence of the butler, but real for all that. The talk of people who have worked hard and are eating at last with their feet under a friendly table, while the rain comes down outside the high-barred windows. They speak of the day, of the guest arrived out of the wet, of some small drama of the kitchen, of news from the village brought up by the carrier. The cook, off her feet at last, is a softer creature here than she was in the heat of her kingdom an hour ago. The footmen, out of the family sight, are young men again, and the butler, presiding, allows it all within limits, because he knows what the mistress knows, that a household eats together in warmth, or it flies apart, and that this hour of plain supper and quiet fellowship at the scrub table is the mortar that holds the whole great edifice up. Outside, the rain. Inside, down here at the bottom of the house, a long table of tired people being kind to one another in the lamplight before the last work of the night. Near the foot of the stairs that come down from the dining room there is a snug guarded little chamber that is the butler's own by day and by night, and it holds the most valuable movable thing in the whole establishment, so it is worth a look before we go deeper below. This is the butler's pantry, and it is here, and not in the grand rooms above, that the silver lives. All through dinner, the plate was in use above, the branched candlesticks, and the salvers and the serving dishes, and the ranks of forks and spoons. And now, as the meal ends, it all comes back down here to be washed with particular care in its own lead-lined sink, dried and put away, for silver is soft and easily marked, and is never trusted to the rough handling of the scullery. Along the walls stand the deep drawers, and the baize-lined cases where it sleeps between meals, each piece in its own felt bed, and set into the wall, or in a strong closet close by, is the plate safe, iron-doored and locked, where the best of it goes at night, the great pieces that come out only for grand occasions, the family plate accumulated over generations and worth in itself more than a labourer would earn in many lifetimes. And this is why the butler, alone of all the upper servants, very often beds down here in a narrow cot in or beside his pantry, keeping his nightly guard over the silver like a dragon on its hoard, so that no one could carry off the plate in the night without first getting past the sleeping man who has charge of it. It tells you something, that arrangement, about how such a household reckoned its treasures and its trust. The plate was wealth in its most portable and tempting form, and the man given the keeping of it was the most trusted servant in the house, and he took that trust up quite literally into his sleep. lying down each night between the family and the loss of their silver. Tonight, his last rounds done, he will do just that, settling at last onto his narrow bed with the plate safe locked at his shoulder and the whole dark house above him quiet, and he will fall into the light, watchful sleep of a man who has kept other people's valuables safe for 30 years and would wake at a footfall. There is a sound that runs through a house like this all day long that we have not yet spoken of, and by night it falls silent. And its silence is part of the deep peace of the small hours, and that is the sound of the bells. All through the waking day, the family summon the servants by bell, a pull on a handle, or a sash in any room upstairs, setting a wire running through the walls and the ceilings, down and along and down again, until it reaches the servants' passage below and jangles one bell in a long row of them, mounted high on the wall there. And each bell in that row is labelled drawing room, library, master's dressing room, the blue bedroom, and each has its own note, so that a servant sitting in the hall below has only to hear which bell is ringing and see which is still swinging on its coiled spring to know exactly which room, in all that great building, is asking for something, and to send the right person up. It is a marvel of a system, in its way a whole building wired together so that a hand lifted in a far bedroom can, a moment later, bring a footman to the door, and it means that the family, wherever they are never more than a bell pull away from anything they might want. All day those bells jangle and the servants answer, up and down the stairs from dawn to midnight, at the summons of hands they cannot see. But now, at this hour, the bells hang still. The family are in their beds and want nothing, or want only what has already been set ready for them, the warm sheets and the banked fire and the covered candle. The long row of bells in the dark passage below hangs motionless on its springs, every wire slack, and will not stir again until the morning, when the first sleepy pull from an early waking room sets one of them going, and starts the whole day's answering once more. There is a particular peace in a household full of silent bells, if you know to listen for it. It is the sound of no one needing anything, of the whole demanding apparatus of service at rest, of even the servants, for these few hours, released from the reach of those wires and left to their own sleep. And a great house on the edge of winter is above all things a provisioned house, a stronghold stocked against the cold months the way a ship is stored for a long voyage, and down the chill north side of the offices run the larders where all that provender is kept, worth walking past on our way through the dark lower regions. There is the meat larder, chill and clean and flagged with its hooks and marble shelves, and the game larder, cool and airy and screened, where the birds and the hares from the estate's own coverts hang in their feather and fur, ripening in the chill, the pheasants and the partridges and the woodcock, a whole hanging harvest of the autumn shooting. There is the dry store with its bins of flour and oatmeal, its sacks and jars and canisters, the tea and the sugar and the spices under the housekeeper's lock. There is the apple loft, where the fruit of the orchard lies in ranks on slatted shelves, not touching, sweetening slowly through the winter, filling the still air with the smell of stored apples that is one of the best smells there is. And buried somewhere out in the grounds, dug deep into a bank and roofed over and half forgotten, there is the ice house, a great brick-lined pit packed each winter with ice cut from the frozen lake and rammed down hard and covered with straw, where it keeps, astonishingly, right through the summer, so that even in August this household can have ice, can cool its wine and set its creams and jellies, drawing all year on a single hard frost stored away underground. It is a whole science of keeping, all of this, worked out over centuries, the arts by which it feeds itself and its dependents through the dead of the year without a single shop within reach, the salting and the smoking and the potting, the storing and the drying and the icing, the laying in against want. And tonight all those cold larders lie full and dark and quiet, the stored plenty of a whole year's land and labour ranked on their shelves in the cold, enough to carry every soul indoors and on the estate through the long grey winter that is coming down outside, so that whatever the weather does, however hard the frost bites, and however deep the snow lies, this house and its people will be warm and fed and provided for until the spring comes round again. And all of it, the house and the woods and the fields and the gardens and the sleeping family and the sleeping servants, is turning tonight quietly on the great revolving wheel of the year, and it is worth feeling where on that wheel we are, this wet night before we go up. For a seat like this does not live by the clock so much as by the calendar, by the vast unhurried march of the seasons that governs everything on the land around it, and the year has swung round now to that particular hinge of it, late autumn going over into winter, when the light fails early and the rain sets in, and the estate draws inward toward the cold months. The harvest is long gathered, the ricks thatched, the last apples in the loft. The plough has been through the stubble, the leaves are down, the shooting is in its season, the guns out after the birds on the fine days. The cattle are in from the far pastures, and the household, feeling the change as surely as the land does, has drawn the curtains earlier each evening, and built the fires higher, and laid in its stores, and settled into the long inward winter rhythm of a household that knows the cold is coming and has made itself ready. There is a deep and ancient comfort in that, in belonging to a place so bound up with the turning year that you feel the seasons in the very running of the home, and it is a comfort we have half lost, we who can eat strawberries at Christmas and hardly notice whether it is light or dark outside. Here the year is everything. Here the whole life of the house and the estate rises and falls with it. Sowing and growing and harvest and rest, spring lambs and summer hay and autumn fruit and winter fireside. On and on, the same wheel their grandparents turned on, and their grandchildren will turn on after them. And tonight is one turn of it, one wet autumn night, among all the autumn nights there have ever been here. The year leaning over into the dark half of itself, the home pulling its warmth close about it, everyone in it asleep and safe, while the rain does the old necessary work of soaking the land for the spring that will come, as it always comes, in its turn, when the wheel has carried them all round through the winter and out the other side into the light again. There is one more person below stairs who keeps a small kingdom of her own, and her quarters are worth looking into on the way past, because it is one of the quietest and most particular places in the whole building. This is the housekeeper, the woman who sat at the foot of the servants' table opposite the butler, and off the passage near the kitchen she has a private den, and it is neither a family room nor quite a servant's one, but something in between, the seat of her authority, snug and orderly, and lit by a good lamp of its own. She is a woman of perhaps 50, unmarried, addressed by courtesy as though she were dressed in dark stuff with a chatelaine of keys at her waist, and those keys are the visible sign of what she is, the keeper of the stores, the mistress of everything in the house that is kept under lock because it is valuable and might tempt. The tea is locked away, for tea is dear and pilfered easily. The sugar is locked away. The wax candles, the spices, the preserves, the good linen, all of it is in her charge, given out by her hand in measured amounts, entered by her in a book, and the keys that open all those cupboards and presses hang at her waist all day and go under her pillow at night. Along one wall stand the presses where the household linen lives, and if she opens one for you, a smell comes out of it that is one of the loveliest in the house. The smell of clean linen kept with lavender and dried herbs, sheets and pillowcases and tablecloths in great smooth folded stacks, some of them old, worked with the initials of women in this family who have been dead for 80 years, mended and turned and cherished and handed down, because good linen was a form of wealth in itself and was treated as such. and beyond the linen press is the still room, her particular domain. A cool, clean little room with a bench and shelves where the finer work of the household is done that is above the rough business of the kitchen. Here the preserves are made in their season, and the fruit is bottled, and the cordials and the elderflower wine are put up, and the shelves are ranked with jars and bottles that hold the court essence of summers gone by, jam the deep red of garnets, jelly the gold of amber, the whole bright fruit of the estate's own gardens, sealed away in glass against the long grey winter that is now, tonight, closing in around the walls. On a wet black night in the depth of the year, there is something in those still-room shelves that steadies the heart, the proof, ranked and gleaming, that the summer was real, and will come again, and was saved. Now let us go right out to the edge of the household, as far from the warm drawing-room as it is possible to go and still be on the estate, out to where the horses are, because the men who brought you here through the rain, and the beasts that pulled you, are owed a thought before the night closes down. Across the stable yard from the main door, through the wet dark, its cobbles running with water and shining in the light of a single lantern, runs the long range of the stables and the coach house, and though the family are at their music and their tea indoors, the day is not yet done out here. In the coach house the carriage that carried you up the drive stands with the mud of the lanes still on its wheels, and a groom is at work on it by lantern light even now, sponging the splashes from the panels, because a gentleman's carriage does not stand dirty overnight if there is a man to clean it. And in the long warm range of the stable itself, behind a stout door that keeps the weather out, the horses are stabled for the night, and it is a good place to linger for a moment. The stable, on a night like this. For a stable full of horses on a wet night is its own kind of warm room, warmer than you would think, heated by the great bodies of the animals themselves, thick with the good clean smell of hay and horse and leather, and the faint sweetness of the feed, and full of the small comfortable sounds of beasts at rest, the shift of a hoof in the straw, the blow of a soft nose, the steady grinding of a horse working slowly through its hay. The coachman comes through with his lantern for a last look before he turns in, the same man who sat up on the box in the streaming wet with the collar of his coat to his ears, dry now and fed now, moving down the line of stalls to see that each horse is right, that each is rugged against the cold, that the water is clean and the hay is good. He runs a hand along a neck, says a low word to one that frets, and the horse leans its great head against him for a moment in the lantern light, and there is between the man and the animal an old wordless understanding, the understanding of two creatures who have worked hard together in bad weather and are glad, both of them, to be under a roof at last. Then he hangs the lantern by the door and takes a last look down the warm breathing dark of the stable, and goes out across the running cobbles through the rain to his own bed above the coach house, and the horses are left to the night. Before we leave the dark grounds and come back in for the last of the evening, let your mind go out once more, past the stable yard and the walled garden, to the woods that lie all about the estate, for they are as much a part of it as the walls and older, and they are worth a thought on a wild wet night when the wind is in them. A property like this is wooded land, and the trees are not merely scenery but a living part of the family's wealth and care, tended and cropped and replanted down the generations exactly as the fields are, under the eye of a woodman or forester who knows every stand and coppice on the entire estate as a shepherd knows his flock. There are the ancient trees, first of all, the great oaks and the vast solitary beech and the dark cedars on the lawns, some of them centuries old, planted by hands long dead or standing wild here since before the house was dreamed of, and these are cherished and never touched, the venerable elders of the place, worth more standing than any timber could fetch. And then there are the working woods, the plantations and the coppices, planted and felled in their long unhurried turn, the oak for building, and the ash for tool handles, and the sweet chestnut for fencing, and the hazel cut back to the stool every few years for hurdles and thatching spars. A whole quiet economy of wood, turning over on a rhythm of decades that no single lifetime ever sees the whole of. Tonight the woods are roaring softly in the night, all of them, the ancient and the young alike, taking the wind and the rain together, and there is a wildness in the sound of a great wood at night in a storm that is thrilling to lie warm and listen to. The bare boughs of the oaks grind and creak. The mass of the trees moves as one in the gusts, a vast, soft, surging roar, rising and falling across all the woods, water streaming off a million twigs, and down in the wet leaf litter beneath them, the mice and the voles keep to their burrows, and the owl hunts silent overhead, and a fallen branch, rotten at last, comes down somewhere in the wet with a soft crash that no one hears. And in the morning, when the wind has dropped, the woodman will walk out in the wet to see what the night has done, what has come down and what has held, the way he does after every storm, reading his woods like a book, and the great patient work of the trees will go on, growing in the wet and the rain, adding another ring to the 200 or the 300 they have already laid down, patient and enduring, and almost eternal beside the brief, warm human lives asleep at their heart. There are working buildings ranged about the yards behind the great front that never see a member of the family from one year to the next, and yet the whole comfort of the table and the wardrobe flows out of them, and 2 of them are worth looking into before we leave the outdoor dark, for they are the quiet province of the women of the estate. The first is the dairy, and it is one of the coolest and cleanest and most beautiful working rooms there is, built on the shaded north side away from the sun, floored and shelved in stone and tile and slate to hold the chill, so that even on the hottest day of summer it stays chill as a cellar. Along its slate shelves stand the wide, shallow pans of the morning's milk, set out to let the cream rise, and the air is sweet and faintly sour with milk and scrubbing and wet stone, and everything in it gleams, the copper and the wood and the tile, scoured and scalded and spotless, for nowhere on the whole estate is cleanliness guarded so fiercely as here, where a moment's carelessness can turn a whole day's milk. It is the dairymaid's kingdom, and by this hour her long day is done, the evening milk set, the churn scoured, the butter she made this morning pressed into its moulds and stamped with the mark of the house and carried to the cold larder, and the dairy stands empty and dim and cold in the wet dark, waiting for her to come back to it before dawn. Next along is a hotter, steamier, harder place, the wash-house, where the endless business of keeping a great household in clean linen is carried on, and it is a world of its own, with its own long weekly rhythm. Here stand the great coppers for boiling, and the wooden tubs and the dollies for pounding the wash. The washboards, the ringing mangle with its heavy rollers, the racks and lines where everything is dried on wet days, the flat irons heating by the fire. On washing day this room is a place of steam and heat and enormous labour, the laundry maids up to their reddened elbows from before dawn, boiling and scrubbing and rinsing and bluing and starching and wringing the mountains of sheets and shirts and tablecloths and petticoats that a household of this size gets through, and then the long toil of drying and ironing and folding and airing before it all goes back up, sweet and smooth and perfect, to the linen presses. Tonight the wash-house is quiet, its coppers cold, a few things drying on the racks in the last warmth of the banked fire, but you can read in it, as in the gun-room and the dairy, a life of hard-skilled women's work going on out here in the yards, unseen and unthanked, on which the smooth, clean comfort of the rooms above entirely depends. And the estate does not end at its own yards and gardens, but runs out for miles in every direction over the dark, wet country, and it carries with it a world of people bound to the house by ties that we have almost wholly lost the feel of, and it is worth thinking of them on this night out there in the rain. At the end of the long drive, where it meets the road, stands the lodge, a little house at the gates, and in it tonight a lamp still burns, for the lodge-keeper and his wife live their whole lives at that gate, opening it and closing it, watching who comes and goes, the first face any visitor meets, and the last they pass on leaving. Beyond the park wall lie the farms, worked by tenant families who have in many cases farmed the same fields under the same family for generations, father to son on both sides, landlord and tenant grown into a relationship, half commercial and half something much older and deeper, a mutual belonging. Scattered through it all are the cottages of the labourers and the shepherds and the woodmen, and in the village the parson, whose living is in the family's gift, and the little school the family built and pays for, where the children of the estate learn their letters. It was an ordered world, this, a pyramid of duty and dependence with the family at its head, and we should neither prettify it nor sneer at it from the far side of all that has changed since, but simply try to feel it as it felt to those inside it. For the family, the land and its folk were not merely a source of income, but a charge, a responsibility that came with the name and the acres, and the best of such families felt it keenly. The sense that the whole visible world from their windows, the fields and the farms and the cottages and the church and the school and the people in all of them, was theirs to answer for, to keep up, to be good to hand on. And for the people on the estate, in return, there was a security and a belonging that had its own deep worth, hard as their lives often were. The knowledge of exactly where you stood and to whom you belonged, the broth sent down from the great kitchen when you were ill, the cottage you would not be turned out of in your old age, the place at the school for your child, the close web of a settled rural world in which almost nobody, high or low, was ever quite alone. Tonight all of them sleep under the same rain, the family in their great beds, and the tenants in their farmhouses, and the labourers in their cottages, the whole living body of the estate lying quiet in the dark, from the lodge at the gates to the farthest shepherd's hut on the hill, bound together, for better and for worse, into one old enduring thing. And it is worth standing here, in imagination, in the doorway between the warm stable and the wet yard, and letting your mind go out for a moment from the house altogether, out past the stable yard and the kitchen gardens and the glass houses, out into the great black dripping park that surrounds the whole small lit settlement of the house on every side. Because it does not stand alone. It stands in the middle of its land, and the land tonight is a wide dark country of the rain, and there is a strange deep pleasure, when you are safe and dry inside, in following the weather out into all the places where no one is, out over the lawns, silver where the light from a low window catches the wet grass, and then black beyond, out across the ha-ha and into the park proper, where the great old trees stand about in the dark, the oaks and the cedars and the single vast beech, each one holding up its bare wet branches to the rain, water running down each twig, pooling in the hollows of the ground where the deer are lying up somewhere under the trees with the rain on their backs. Out to the lake, a long sheet of black water with the rain stippling its whole surface, 10,000 tiny rings appearing and spreading and vanishing on it. Each second, a soft continuous hiss rising off it into the dark. And further out still, beyond the park wall, the country sleeps in the rain. The home farm, its ricks thatched against the wet, a dog asleep in the straw of the barn, the cattle standing patient in the byre, the lane running down to the village, a stream now, its ruts brimming, and the village itself, a mile off, a scatter of cottages along a street, with not a light showing in any window at this hour, every soul in bed, the smoke beaten flat on the chimney pots by the rain. And at the end of the village street, the church, older than the house, older than the family, its square grey tower standing up black against the barely lighter sky, and around its foot the churchyard where the stones lean in the wet grass, and under the stones the long generations of this parish, the men who ploughed these fields and the women who bore their children, the very people whose names are written in the old registers locked in the church chest, all of them lying quiet under the same rain that is falling on the house and the park and the lake and the sleeping farms, the one rain falling on the quick and the dead alike across the whole dark parish, patient, endless, and kind. Among all the ways the family has of passing the long middle of the evening, there is one older and quieter than the music, and it is going on in a corner of the drawing-room even now, and it is worth drawing close to hear. Someone is reading aloud. It is one of the grown daughters, or perhaps the son, sitting near the branch of candles with a book open on the knee, reading out to the others in an easy, unhurried voice while the rest of the family listen and do the things their hands are busy with. This was one of the great pleasures of the age, the reading aloud of an evening, and it filled countless hours in countless drawing-rooms across the country. For a book read aloud is a thing shared in a way that a book read alone can never be. A single story entering a whole roomful of people at once through one voice, so that they laugh in the same places, and hold their breath in the same places, and carry the same characters up to bed with them at the end of the night. Eh? The book is very likely a novel, one of the great serial novels of the day, published a month at a time so that the whole nation followed them together and waited for the next part, as for news of a friend, and the reader has reached some tender or thrilling turn in it, and the room has gone still to listen. The mistress's needle pauses over her work. The master, who claims not to care for novels, has quietly stopped pretending to read his newspaper and is following every word. And the reader's voice goes on, giving the different characters their different voices, slowing for the sad parts, and the fire ticks, and the rain runs down the black glass, and the whole family is carried off together into a different house, a different set of lives, whether not their own, without one of them stirring from the warm circle of the candlelight. It is the same thing you are doing this very moment, lying in the dark and being carried off into this house by a voice, and it is one of the oldest comforts our kind has, older than any house, older than reading itself. The gathering of people in the light to be told a story while the dark presses on the walls. At another table, a little apart, a quieter game is going forward, for not everyone reads or listens, and the master and one or two others have settled to a hand of cards. It is whist most likely, the grave and beloved card game of the century, played in near silence with a seriousness that can seem comic to those outside it. 4 players in 2 partnerships, the cards going round, the tricks gathered in neat piles, hardly a word spoken beyond what the game requires. There is a whole unspoken language at the whist table, a lift of an eyebrow, the particular way a card is laid down, the small silences by which partners who have played together for years understand one another perfectly without a syllable, and the master and his partner, who have sat down opposite the same 2 opponents on 1,000 such evenings, play now with the wordless ease of long habit. The candles gutter over the green cloth of the card table. A trick is taken and turned. The rain goes on. And this too, this silent, absorbed hour over the cards, is one of the shapes the long evening takes, one of the quiet ways a family fills the hours between dinner and sleep in a world that offered no other entertainment than the one it made for itself. There is a plainer place off the men's end of the house that we passed by earlier and are worth going back to, for it tells you much about how such a family lives on its land, and that is the gun room. It is a working room, not a fine one, cool and orderly, smelling of oiled steel and leather and gun oil, and the faint tang of the day's wet dogs, and it is here that the sporting life of the estate is kept and tended. Along one wall the guns stand in their rack behind a locked glass front, the fowling pieces and the rifles cleaned and oiled and gleaming dully in the lamplight, each in its place. Below them are the drawers of cartridges and the cleaning rods and the flasks and the worn leather cartridge bags, and on pegs hang the shooting coats and the old hats and the game bags, and everything has the deep worn look of things used hard and cared for well through many seasons. On a wet night like this, the gun room is quiet and empty, its work done, but you can read the whole outdoor life of the place in it, the early frosted mornings out after the birds, the long days walking the coverts and the stubble with the dogs quartering ahead, the whole rhythm of the sporting year by which a family like this measures its autumns and winters as much as by anything in the almanac. It is the outdoor, muddy, wind-bitten counterpart to all the candle-lit softness of the rooms above, and it belongs to the same life, and the mud and the firelight are two halves of the one world. And spare a thought, before the night quite closes, for where all the good things of the table came from, for the flowers on the dinner cloth and the fruit in the silver dishes and the vegetables handed round did not appear by magic, but were grown a stone's throw from the door in the walled kitchen garden, and the glass houses that are the pride of the head gardener and the quiet engine of the entire domestic table. Out there in the wet dark now, beyond the stable yard, lies the great walled garden, its high old brick walls holding the day's warmth long into the night, and sheltering the fruit trees trained flat against them, and along one side the range of glass houses, the vineries and the peach house and the stove house, where under their skins of glass warmed by hot water pipes through the cruelest months, the tender things are coaxed into growing out of their season. It is a science and an art, this walled world, presided over by the head gardener with the same jealous pride the cook takes in her kitchen, and from it flows all year round the extraordinary abundance that a great establishment takes for granted, the early strawberries and the late grapes, the peaches and the melons raised under glass, the cut flowers for the rooms in the depth of winter, the endless vegetables. Tonight it all stands dark and dripping and asleep under the rain, the glass houses faintly aglow where a stove has been banked for the night, the walled garden holding its breath in the wet dark, and it will be back at its patient work by first light tomorrow, growing the summer that this family will eat all through the year. While the family sit on downstairs over their music and their tea, the upper floors are not idle, for there is a whole quiet labour going on above their heads to make the bedrooms ready for the night, and it falls, as so much falls, to the housemaids. Slip up the back stairs and watch them at it, for it is one of the great unseen kindnesses of such a place, and no one who benefits from it ever sees it done. A housemaid goes from bedchamber to bedchamber along the cold upper passages with the tools of her evening trade, a scuttle of coal, a box of matches, a great brass can of hot water wrapped in a cloth to hold its heat, and in each room in turn she performs the same small ritual of preparation, so that when the family come up, hours from now, each of them will step into a chamber made warm and soft, and welcoming as if by magic, that the magic is only a girl on the back stairs with aching arms. In each chamber she kneels first at the grate and lays and lights a fire, coaxing it up from paper, and kindling and coal until it catches and begins to throw its heat into the long cold air of a room that has stood empty and chill all day. She draws the heavy curtains against the black streaming glass. She turns down the bed, folding back the covers in a neat diagonal so that it stands open and inviting, and she takes the warming pan, that flat-covered brass vessel on its long handle filled with embers from the fire, and passes it in slow strokes between the sheets, up and down, so that the deathly damp chill of unslept linen is driven out, and a pocket of gathered heat is left in its place. She fills the ewer on the washstand with fresh water, and sets the great can of hot beside it for the morning. She trims and sets out the candles. And then she gathers her things and goes on to the next room and does it all again, and the next, the whole length of the sleeping floor, so that behind her she leaves a row of warm lit waiting chambers. each one made ready by her 2 hands for a body that will never know she was there. There is a bath to think of, too, on a night like this, for the pleasures of hot water in a cold season are among the oldest there are, and in this house, in this year, a bath is not the simple turning of a tap that we know. It is a small campaign, mounted by the servants, and its object is a single vessel of steaming water set before a bedroom fire. When a member of the family wishes to bathe, the word goes down, and in the kitchen the great coppers are already hot, and the footmen and the maids carry the water up, can after heavy can of it, up flight after flight from the basement to the bedroom floor, and pour it into the hip bath that has been set ready on a folded cloth before the blazing grate. It is a squat shining tin bath, shaped to sit in with the knees drawn up, and it stands there in the firelight full of hot water, gently steaming, with towels warming on a rail beside it and a screen drawn round to keep off the draught, and to lower yourself into hot water before a roaring fire while the rain runs down the black window and the wind moves in. The chimney is, quite simply, one of the deepest bodily comforts a human being can know, and it was known in this house on wet nights long before it was known to us, and known the more keenly for the trouble it cost to make. There was no endless hot water then, running clean and forgotten from a pipe. Every drop of it had been drawn and heated and carried up the stairs on somebody's shoulder, and so a bath was a thing to be savoured while it lasted, sunk into gratefully, not squandered, a warm island of a quarter of an hour before the fire with the cold wet night held off beyond the screen. And when it was done, and the bather was gone dry and glowing to bed, the whole slow business ran again in reverse. The water dipped out can by can, and carried back down the stairs it had come up, so that even the emptying of a single bath was an hour's work for tired arms below. Down at the foot of the house, meanwhile, in the warm hall and the passages, there are other lives settling towards sleep that are easy to overlook, and they are the animals of the household. For a country house of this kind is never only people. By the dying fire in the great hall, the dogs are stretched out on the flagstones, the master's sporting dogs and an old spaniel or two that have the run of the family rooms, and that have had their evening at last, after a long wet day, fed and let out into the rain and brought in again to steam gently by the embers, and now they sleep the boneless, untroubled sleep of dogs, a paw twitching now and then as they run through some dream of the day's fields. A cat sits somewhere on a warm windowsill above a radiator of pipe or curls in the housekeeper's chair, and these too are part of the great settling, part of the whole breathing household drawing in toward its rest, and there is something in the sight of the old dogs asleep by the last of the hall fire, safe in out of the weather, that speaks to the same deep place in us as everything else about this house on this night, the ancient animal gladness of being warm and fed and dry and among your own, while the cold rain falls on the world outside and cannot reach you. Come back in now, out of the imagined rain and the sleeping country, back through the wet dark and the warm stable, and up into the lit house, because the family's evening is drawing toward its own gentle close, and there is a last small ceremony to share before the household begins to think of bed. It is late enough now that the merriment has burned down to embers, the way the fires have. The daughter has left the piano. The son is sprawled and sleepy. The talk has gone soft, and occasional, long, comfortable silences, opening between remarks, nobody troubling to fill them. And into this drowsy hush comes the tea tray, carried up by a footman and set before the mistress, and the last quiet rite of the day begins. Tea at this hour is not the tea of the afternoon. It is a smaller, sleepier, more intimate thing, a cup taken among one's own people at the very end of the day as a kind of shared benediction before parting for the night. The mistress makes it herself, unlocking the caddy the housekeeper has filled, measuring the leaves, pouring the hot water, and there is something in watching her do it, in the small, precise, unhurried motions of her hands, that is deeply calming to see. The same motions made by the same hands in the same chair every night for 30 years. The cups go round, the guest is served first, and the family sits close now in the shrinking circle of firelight and lamplight, drawn in together as the room darkens at its edges, the candles guttering low in their sockets, the fire sunk to a deep red glow that pulses gently and throws long, soft shadows up the walls, and they drink their tea, and say little, and are simply together, and content in a way that needs no words, and would be spoiled by them. And it is here, in this last hushed half hour, that the true purpose of the whole long evening quietly reveals itself, if you are still awake enough to feel it. Everything that has happened tonight, the dressing and the dinner and the music and the tea, all the ceremony and all the ease, has been in the deepest sense about this, about a family being together, unhurried and unthreatened, in the warmth at the end of a day, while the world outside does its worst against the walls. That is the thing these walls were built to make, not grandeur, though it has grandeur, not wealth, though it rests on wealth, but this small circle of people who belong to one another, sitting quietly in the light with the dark held off, drinking tea, growing sleepy, at peace. Every stone of the house, all the servants' labour, all the acres of the land exist in the end to produce this one soft, irreducible thing, repeated night after night after night down the long years. A family at peace together before sleep. And you, the stranger taken in out of the rain, have been given a place inside it for one night, which is the oldest and best gift a home can give. Before the family scatters to its beds, though, the whole household gathers once more, and this time it gathers as one. In a family seat run in the old way, as this one is, the day ends with prayers, and prayers are for everyone, family and servants alike, the only moment in the whole day when the two separated worlds of the house come together into one room and kneel on the same floor. Word goes round, above stairs and below, and they assemble, most often in the hall or the library, and it is a sight that tells you almost everything about how such a household understood itself. The family come in and take their places at the front, the master and mistress and the grown children and the old grandmother help to a chair, and then the servants file in behind them in their order, the butler and the housekeeper, the footman and the lady's maid, the cook, the housemaids, the kitchen maids, the boot boy, and last of all the little scullery maid, wiping her wet hands on her apron, brought up for these few minutes from her sea of pots to kneel with the rest. They are not equals in that room. Everyone in it knows the exact rank they hold, and the ranks are as fixed as iron, and no one would dream of confusing them. And yet for these few minutes they are all doing the same thing, in the same room, under the same roof, and the master reads the same words over all of them, and something in the old arrangement holds them together in that moment, as members of one household, one small human company sheltering under one roof against the same dark. The master takes the book and reads a psalm in his slow, deep, unhurried voice, and the ancient words fall into the quiet room, words about lying down and taking rest, about the one who keeps watch and does not sleep, about the going out and the coming in, words worn smooth by centuries of being read aloud at the ends of days exactly like this one, in houses exactly like this one, all across the country, all falling now into the same rainy dark. And for a moment the whole labouring, hierarchical, hard-working household is simply still together, heads bowed, while the rain comes down outside, and the candles burn, and the day is given up. And then it is over, and they rise, and the spell of it breaks gently, and the two worlds separate again as they must. The servants file out and go down to finish the last of their work, and then to their own cold garrets under the roof. The family lingers a moment longer in the warmth, and the great slow turning of the house towards sleep, which has been gathering all evening, now begins in earnest, floor by floor and chamber by chamber, as the vast machine of the day powers finally down. It begins, this closing down, with the butler, and it is his last, and in some ways his most important duty of the day, and he performs it each night of his life with the same unhurried thoroughness. When the family have gone up, he takes a lamp and makes his round. He goes through the whole ground floor, one room after another, and shuts it down for the night. In the dining room he sees the last of the silver put away and locked. In the drawing room he checks that the guard is across the sinking fire, that no coal can fall out onto the rug in the night and set it all alight. For fire is the great terror of every home lit by flame, and the fear of it runs under everything. He snuffs the candles that are still burning, pinching each wick or capping it, and the little points of light go out one by one, and the chambers fall dark behind him as he passes through them, so that the lamplit warmth shrinks in his wake, one after another, into shadow. And then he goes to the doors. The great front door through which you came in out of the rain is barred and bolted, top and bottom, the heavy bolts shot home with a deep solid sound that is one of the most reassuring sounds there is, the sound of a house sealing itself for the night. The garden doors, the door to the offices, every way in is checked and made fast. The dog is let out a last time into the wet, and brought in and settled. And when it is all done, when every fire is guarded, the last candle is out, and each door is locked, and the whole ground floor lies unlit and still and secure behind him. The butler climbs the back stairs at last to his own room with his single candle, the last servant but one to seek his bed, leaving the great house below him locked and black and quiet, holding all its sleeping people safe inside it, while the rain still falls steadily on the roof over them all. Alert. But there is one person who has not yet gone up, and it is time now to come back to her, because the whole evening has been quietly moving toward this since the very beginning. When the prayers were done and the family rose to go to their beds, the old grandmother did not go with them. She said her good nights, and was kissed by the grown grandchildren, and watched them climb the stairs, and then she asked to be left a little while by the fire, as she often does, for the very old do not sleep as the young do, and she has never in her long life gone easily or early to her bed. And so a shawl was tucked more closely about her, and a last small heap of coal was put on for her, and the family went up, and now she sits alone in the great quiet drawing-room with the dying fire, the last soul awake in all the sleeping building, but for a servant or two finishing below, and the rain at the black windows, and her own long memory for company. She is very still in her chair. To look at her you would think her asleep, or lost in the vacancy that people too readily assume in the very old. She is neither. Behind that still face and those folded hands a whole century is turning over slowly in the firelight, for she was born, this woman, when the previous century had not quite ended, and she has seen the whole of this one come in and roll forward, and she carries inside her, tonight, by this fire, a world that no one else alive has ever seen or can ever see, that go out of the world entirely on the day she does. She remembers this house when it was full of different people. She remembers her own wedding in the village church more than 60 winters gone. She remembers faces that no living eye but hers has looked upon in half a century, voices no one else can hear, a whole vanished company of the loved and the lost who are as real to her, sitting here in the dark, as the sleeping grandchildren overhead. And after a while, when the fire has sunk lower and the house is wholly silent, she reaches out slowly, with a hand gone light and spotted with age, to the little table at her side, to a drawer set into it that she keeps to herself, and she draws it open. It has not been opened in a long time. Inside there is not much. An old handkerchief, a folded paper gone soft as cloth, a few small things kept for reasons the daylight world has no use for, and she takes out from among them a little case, worn smooth at the edges from much handling, and she opens it in her 2 hands there by the last of the firelight, and inside it is a miniature, a small painted portrait on ivory, no bigger than a coin, the face of a young man, painted more than 60 years since, dark-eyed, in a high collar in the fashion of a bygone age, looking out of the frame as fresh and living as the day it was set down. It is her husband. It is the man she married in the village church all those years ago, painted when they were newly wed, and the whole of their life together lay ahead of them still, and who has been gone from this world now for longer than most of the people asleep upstairs have been alive. She holds it in the firelight and looks at it, and there is no grief in her face, or none of the sharp kind, for grief that old has by now turned into something quieter and deeper and almost sweet, a settled tenderness worn smooth by 60 years of carrying. She simply looks at him, the man she loved, by the same firelight they must have sat by together once, in this same room, when they were the young of the house and someone else, now long dead in her turn, sat old and quiet in the corner remembering. And perhaps she thinks of the tune her granddaughter played earlier without knowing what it was, the tune she herself once played on a night like this, when the hands now light and spotted on the case were quick and young on the keys, and the dark-eyed man in the miniature stood by the instrument and turned the pages for her, and did not take his eyes from her face. The wheel has come all the way round. The girl who played is the old woman by the fire, and that is the whole of a life, and she knows it, and she is not sorrowful, sitting here holding the painted face of her husband while the rain falls on the roof and her great-grandchildren sleep. She is grateful. She has had it all, the whole slow turning of it, and it was good, and now it is nearly done, and she is content to have it so. Then, after a time, she closes the little case and holds it a moment longer in her folded hands and puts it back among the other small kept things and slides the drawer shut. And she sits on a while by the last red embers, unhurried, the way she has done everything in her long life, until at last she takes up her cane and her candle and rises slowly and goes to seek her own bed at the very end of the wakeful house, the last of them all to climb the stairs into the dark. And what she carries up with her, the whole freight of a century, the loved faces and the lost voices and the young dark-eyed man in the little case, goes up the stairs with her unseen, and is the truest and most precious thing in all the sleeping house, and no one but she will ever know it was there at all. Now it is your turn to go up, for the hour is very late, and a candle has been left for you at the foot of the great stairs, one of a little row of chamber candlesticks set out on a table there with a taper and a box, each one waiting to carry a member of the household up into the dark. You take yours, this flat broad candlestick with its short handle made for exactly this, made to be carried from the lit rooms below up to the cold chambers above, and you light it, and the small flame steadies, and you begin to climb. And here you learn, as everyone in this age learns without thinking, how to move through a great dwelling by a single candle. You go slowly, because to go quickly is to put the flame out. You cup your free hand about it against the draughts that move through it at night, and you climb up out of what little warmth remains below into the enormous cold, quiet black of the upper house, where your one small flame is the only light in all that space, throwing its moving circle onto the stairs before you and the portraits on the wall beside you, faces sliding out of the shadow as you pass and back into it behind you, and above and around you, nothing but the great sleeping dark of the upper floors, and the sound, everywhere, always, of the rain. It is a feeling we have almost entirely lost, this, and it is worth staying inside it for a moment as you climb. The completeness of the night beyond your candle. There is no other light anywhere, no glow beneath a door, no lamp left burning in a passage, no soft electric hum of a house that never truly sleeps. When your candle is the only flame, the blackness it does not reach is total, and the house around you becomes vast and unknowable. A great unlit volume of stairs and passages and shut rooms full of sleeping people, sensed but unseen, and you move through it in your tiny travelling sphere of light, like a diver with a lantern in the deep of the sea. And far from being fearful, there is something in it, on a night like this, that soothes the very floor of the mind, some old inherited peace older than memory, the peace of the one small guarded flame carried carefully towards sleep, the way human beings carried their fires through the night for 100,000 years before the switch on the wall did away with the need. And then you come to your own door, the guest chamber, and you go in, and here at the very end of the climb is the last and kindest of all the evening's comforts, waiting for you in the candlelight. The room is warm. That is the first thing, and after the cold dark of the stairs it is everything. A fire has been lit in the little grate an hour ago by a housemaid climbing these same stairs with a scuttle, so that the room should be warm and welcoming when you came up to it. And it burns low and steady now, and the chill is off the air, and the bed is turned down and waiting. And the bed itself has been thought of too, for tucked down between the sheets is the warming pan, or in this later day the stone bottle wrapped in flannel that has been taking the deathly damp chill off the linen while you sat below, so that when you climb in at last, you will meet not the cold clammy sheets of an unwarmed bed on a wet autumn night, but a pocket of gathered warmth made ready for your body by a hand you never saw. It is a small thing. It is the smallest of things. And it is the whole spirit of the house distilled into one gesture, that even here, even in the guest room at the top of it on a wet night, someone has gone to trouble, quietly and invisibly, so that a stranger should be warm. And so, at the very top of the sleeping house, in the snug waiting chamber that was made ready for you by hands you never saw, the last small acts of the day come quietly to their end. You set your candle down on the chest of drawers, where its little flame doubles itself in the swing of the looking-glass. You cross to the window, the one uncurtained thing left, and stand at it a moment before you shut the weather out, looking down through the streaming glass at the black invisible park, where the rain is still coming down as steadily as it has come down all evening, a faint pale blur where a wet lawn catches the last of the light from a window below, and beyond that nothing, a great soft roaring darkness full of rain. And then you draw the curtain across it, heavy and lined, and the night is gone, shut out behind the wool, and the chamber closes around you, small and lit and warm, an island of firelight at the top of a dark house above a drowned and sleeping country. There is no undressing quickly by a single candle and a low fire, and no reason to hurry it. You take your time. The fire has warmed the air, and the great bed stands turned down and waiting, and somewhere within the sheets is that pocket of gathered heat, the warming pan left there an hour ago, so that the linen, when you finally slip between the sheets and blow out the candle, is not the cold clammy shock of an unwarmed bed on a wet night, but a spreading, cradling, human warmth that closes over you like water. The last thing the little flame shows you before it goes is the shape of the strange kind chamber, the tester of the bed above you, the red glow of the sunken fire in the grate, the shine of the window behind its curtain. And then you pinch the wick, and the blackness comes down complete, and you are lying in a warm bed in a great old house, full of sleeping people with the rain on the roof above you, and there is nowhere in all the world at this moment safer or softer to be. Lie there a while before sleep, though, and listen, because a great old house at night is never quite silent, and its sounds are among the most calming a wakeful mind can be given. There is the rain first, always the rain, on the roof and in the gutters and against the shut window, a steady, soft, continuous wash of sound, with no edges to it, the very sound sleep is made of. And under the rain, the building itself, speaking quietly to itself the way old buildings do. Somewhere below, a clock is ticking, the long case clock in the hall, its slow deep tock carrying faintly up through the floors, and every so often, on the quarter, it chimes, a soft round distant note marking off the night in pieces. Further off, muffled by the rain, the stable clock strikes the hour across the yard. The old timbers shift and settle and tick as the temperature drops, small creaks and knocks moving through its old fabric, the sounds of a great wooden and stone body easing itself down into the night. A door somewhere sighs on its hinge in a draught. The wind moves in the chimney with a low, soft, hollow note. None of it is anything. All of it together is the breathing of the walls around you, the sound of a safe old place holding its sleeping people through the dark, and it asks nothing of you, but that you lie still inside it and let it carry you down. And think, as you lie there on the edge of sleep, of all the others going down into the night under this same roof, level by level, each in their own bed, each carried on the same rain toward the same rest. Below you, where the family lies, the master and mistress are asleep at last in the great bed they have shared for 30 years, the account books and the household cares set down till morning. The grown children slumber in their old childhood chambers, home for the season, dreaming whatever the young dream up above you, under the slates. In the nursery, the two little ones lie deep in the headlong sleep of the very young, the night-light burning low, the nurse abed next door with her door ajar to hear them. And higher and colder still, in the plain garrets beneath the roof, the servants rest, the very ones on whom the whole day turned, the butler and the housekeeper and the cook and the maids, their long labour done at last, a few short hours before it all begins again. And somewhere on the family floor, in a room of her own, the old grandmother is at rest now too, the little worn case back in its drawer, the young painted face shut away beside her, her whole long century folded up till morning, the entire household abed, from the cellar where the wine lies dreaming to the attic, where the maids lie dreaming, every soul of it gone down together, held safe under one roof, while the rain comes down and down over them all. There is one light still burning in all the great sleeping building, and it is the lowest and humblest of them all, far down at the bottom of everything, and we should go to it once more before it too goes out. In the back scullery, well after the family have gone up, and after the cook has banked her range and climbed to her bed, the youngest servant of all is still at her work by the light of a single candle end, finishing the last of it. The great tide of the day's washing up has come down to her at last, everything the kitchen used to make that great dinner, and she has stood at the cold stone sink working through it in water. She heated herself, her hands red and wrinkled and aching, until at last, now in the small hours, the final pot is scoured and turned upside down to drain, and the work is done. She wipes her hands. She sets the kitchen to rights for the morning, and rakes the range, and leaves it banked so that it will be easy to wake into life before dawn. And then she takes up her candle end, the last flame alight in the whole lower house, and she climbs the back stairs past the sleeping floors, all the way up to the cold little garret she shares under the slates, and she is asleep almost before she is lying down, the deep, bottomless sleep of a body worked to its limit, a few hours of it, before she must rise in the dark and begin the whole round again. And behind her, below, the kitchen and the scullery and the servants' hall, and the cellars lie dark and empty and still, the great engine of it all shut down for the night, the last candle out at last. And now, with every soul in it asleep, the house stands alone against the weather in the deep middle of the night, and the weather through the small hours quietly deepens. The rain that fell so steadily all evening does not stop, but a wind gets up to drive it now, coming in off the west with the smell of the sea 100 miles behind it. and it rises through the night in long gathering gusts that sweep across the park and break against the old grey front of the building. You can hear it, half asleep, if you surface for a moment, the wind moving in the great trees of the park, a vast soft roar rising and falling as the gusts come through, the bare branches streaming, the rain flung in soft handfuls against your shuttered window, the low, hollow booming of the wind in the chimney beside your bed, a loose casement somewhere rattling faintly and then still. It should be a fearful thing, a wild, wet, windy night in the deep country with the storm coming in off the west. And it is the very opposite of fearful, lying where you lie, because every gust that breaks against the house breaks against 3 feet of stone that has stood there since before your grandfather's grandfather was born, and turns the rain, and passes on, and cannot reach you. The wilder the night outside, the deeper the safety within. That is the oldest bargain of shelter, felt in the body long before it is thought in the mind, and it is never felt more sweetly than in a strong old house in a storm, warm in a warmed bed, listening to the weather spend itself in vain against the walls. And the walls have heard it all before, 10,000 times over, for the house is very old, and this is only one wet night among all the wet nights it has stood through, and there is a deep calm in remembering it as you drift. The same rain has fallen on this same roof for 200 years and more. The same wind has boomed in these same chimneys on nights like this, over people long dead and forgotten, in the reigns of kings whose names are now only marks in books. Generations of this family have lain in these same beds and listened to the same weather and felt the same safety and gone down into the same sleep. The founder in his armour, the wig-wearing son who planted the cedars, the powdered heiress who saved the acres, all of them, every soul in those climbing portraits, lay here once on wet nights like this one, and heard the rain on the roof and slept. And the house held them all, as it holds the family sleeping in it now, as it holds you tonight, and will hold others long after everyone now under its roof is gone. The same rooms, the same stairs, the same slow clock in the hall, the same rain, the same deep sheltering peace, handed on down the years from sleeper to sleeper, like a flame passed carefully from candle to candle in the dark. There is a great steadying comfort in that, in being for one night the latest in so long a line of people held safe and warm by these same old walls. One more sleeper the house has gathered in out of one more storm. And there is one thing still awake in the sleeping dwelling, one presence that holds its own soft watch all through the night, while every human soul in the place lies unconscious, and that is the fire. Not blazing now, not leaping as it did in the evening when the family sat around it, but banked, sunk low, drawn down to a deep, steady red heart under a grey coat of ash, alive and breathing quietly in grate after grate all through the building. In the great hall the logs have fallen to a bed of glowing embers that pulse very faintly, brightening and dimming as if the fire itself were slowly breathing in its sleep. In the drawing-room, behind its guard, the coals hold a low red glow. In the bedchambers, in your own grate, the same, a small sunken warmth, holding the chill from the sleeping air. And down in the kitchen the range never quite goes out at all, banked and shut down but kept just alive, a coal heart smouldering in the dark waiting to be woken. There is something very old and very deep in that, in the fire kept alive through the night, and it reaches back long before this house, or any house, to the very beginning of us, to the first hearths in the first shelters where the fire was tended and never allowed to die, watched over in turns through the dark, because the fire was life and warmth and safety, and the one power that held the night and the cold and the wild animals at bay. We do not think of it that way now, when heat comes silent and unseen out of the wall, but for almost the whole of human time, the banked fire was the beating heart of the home, the thing you built your home around and your life around, the last glow you saw as you slept, and the first you woke to tend. And in this house tonight it is still true, still exactly true. The fires are the one presence left awake, holding their patient low watch over all the sleepers, holding the warmth through the small hours, the ancient faithful guardian burning quietly on in the dark, while the family and the servants and the animals and the guests all sleep under its care. And before the first grey of dawn, one of those low red hearts will be found by the youngest and earliest of the servants, and coaxed and fed and blown back up into flame, and from that one living fire all the others will be lit again, and the whole warm cycle of the day will begin once more. Nothing will have been lost. The fire carried alive through the night will light the fire of the morning, as it has every morning, as it always will, the same flame in an unbroken line from evening to evening down all the years the walls have stood. But that is still hours off. For now there is only the low red breathing of the banked coals in the dark, grate after grate of it all through the sleeping dark, the quiet faithful warmth holding steady against the wet cold night, leaving every soul beneath the roof exactly as warm and exactly as safe as the whole long evening promised they would be. Out beyond the walls, while the whole household sleeps, the wild world of the grounds holds its own vigil through the streaming wet, and it is a soothing thing to let the mind go out to it for a while, to all the small lives going quietly on out there under the rain while you lie warm and still. In the great trees, deep in the wet ivy that clothes the old trunks, an owl sits hunched and patient, its feathers turned to shed the rain, and now and then it calls, a long, soft, wavering hoot that carries across the sodden grounds, and in at the edge of your sleep, the loneliest and most beautiful note of the country night, and then it lifts on silent wings and drifts low over the wet grass hunting. Somewhere along a hedge a fox trots through the rain on its own night business, its coat sleek and flattened with wet, pausing, listening, moving on, at home in the weather, as nothing indoors is at home in it. Under the dripping trees the fallow deer of the park are lying up in their hollows, folded down into the wet bracken with the rain beading on their backs, chewing slowly, their great soft eyes half closed, waiting out the night as their kind have waited out 10,000 wet nights in these same acres. And in the farm buildings beyond the park wall there are more lives keeping the night hours, warm animal lives breathing in the straw. In the byre the cattle stand and lie in their own thick warmth, a slow shifting and breathing in the gloom, a chain rattling now and then, the sweet smell of hay and beast rising around them. In the stable, as we saw, the carriage horses sleep on their feet, or lie in the deep straw. A barn cat hunts the ricks. And over all of them, over the wild things in the grounds and the tame things in the byre and the sleeping family indoors alike, the same rain comes down, the one weather covering them all, the fox and the owl and the deer and the cattle and the horses and the men, every living thing in the whole dark parish, either hunting quietly through the wet or sheltering warm out of it, all of them equal under the rain, all of them carried together through the same long night toward the same far-off morning. There is a deep peace in thinking of it, of all those lives out there in the dark, each keeping its own small warmth, while you lie keeping yours, one more warm sleeping creature among all the others under the enormous patient rain. And the rain itself, if you follow it, is the surest road of all down into sleep, for it has been falling since before the evening began, and it will go on falling long after you have gone under, and there is no end to it, and no edge to it, and nothing in it that asks anything of you at all. Think of where it comes from, if you like, as you drift away. Out over the western ocean, it rose off the grey face of the sea, drawn up invisibly into the air, carried east on the wind for 100 miles and more as great soft banks of cloud, until it met the land and the hills and let its water go. And now it is coming down, all night, over the whole country, over the moors and the rivers and the towns full of sleeping people, over the dark cathedral cities and the little villages, and over this house among its trees, this one roof among a million, all taking the same rain tonight. It falls on the slates above you, and runs together into rills and pours off into the lead gutters, and down through the pipes and out, and gathers in the yard and the lane, and finds the ditches, and the ditches find the streams, and the streams run down through the black fields to the lake in the park, where every drop that falls sends out its tiny ring in the dark, and the lake brims and feeds the river, and the river runs on all night through the sleeping country toward the distant sea it came from, the whole endless circle of it turning slowly in the dark, water to cloud, to rain to stream, to river to sea, to cloud again, the oldest wheel there is, turning quietly all around your sleep. And that soft voice it makes, the sound of all that falling and running and gathering water, is the very hush the human animal was made to sleep inside of, older than any wall or any bed, the wash our furthest ancestors heard on the roofs of their caves and their huts and their tents 100,000 years ago, the safe old wash, the one that means the sky is emptying itself harmlessly onto a world that will drink it and be greener for it, and that there is nothing to be done about it, and nothing to fear from it, and nowhere to go, but only to lie still in the warm dark and let it fall. It has no tune and no words and no shape, only that even endless whispering wash, rising a little as a gust drives it against the window, sinking again as the gust dies, on, and if you stop trying to listen to any part of it, and simply let the whole of it in, let it fill your ears and your mind, and wash the last of the day out of you, you will find it carries you, the way it has carried sleepers to sleep since the beginning, down and down and down. There comes an hour, in the deep middle of such a night, when the whole turning world seems to pause and hold still, and it is the quietest stretch there is, and you may be just awake enough to feel it settle over the sleeping building like a held breath. It is the time when the night is oldest, long past midnight, and still a great way from dawn, when its wakeful have given up and gone under, when the last late candle in the last cottage for miles has been pinched out, and there is not one lit window in all the dark parish. The fires in the grates have sunk to their last dim embers. The clock in the hall ticks on, but its ticking seems slower now, or the silence between the ticks seems deeper, as if time itself had thickened and grown heavy in the small hours. Nothing moves in all the sleeping building. Not a thing stirs in all the drowned and dripping country around it. The world has come to its lowest ebb, the tide of all its life run right out, every creature that can sleep asleep, and there is only the rain and the wind abroad in the black wet, the slow wheeling of the stars behind the cloud where no one can see them. And there is nothing to dread in that deep stillness, though people fear it who lie awake in it, alone with their troubles. Because tonight you are not awake in it alone. You are held in the middle of a houseful of sleepers, each of them breathing quietly in the dark somewhere near you, the family below and the children above and the servants under the slates, and beyond them the animals in their stalls and byres, and beyond them the sleeping village and the silent farms and the whole slumbering county, a vast invisible fellowship of the sleeping stretching away in every direction from your warm bed into the rainy night. You are one of them now. You have joined the great nightly company of the unconscious, all those millions lying down in the same darkness, all letting go together of the day and its weight, all trusting themselves to the night and the morning that will follow it. There is no watch to keep. There is nothing to hold on to. The doors are locked and the fires are guarded and the windows are barred and the rain is falling, and everyone you could wish to be safe is safe, and the only thing left in all the world for you to do is the thing your body has been aching to do since the moment you first lay down, to let go. So let go. Let the last of the day loosen and drift away from you, all of it, The long, wet road and the arrival out of the rain, the warm hall and the firelit faces, the slow, beautiful evening dissolving now into something soft and shapeless as your mind lets go its grip on it. You do not have to hold any of it. Let the pictures come and go as they please, the way they do on the edge of sleep, rising unbidden and drifting off before you can quite catch them. But the 2 coins of yellow lamplight swinging up the wet drive, the great door opening and the glow coming down the wet steps, the branched candles standing straight and still over the shining dinner table, the slow air the daughter played, that the old grandmother knew, the green breathing dark of the conservatory with the rain on the glass, the little worn case opening in 2 old hands by the last of the firelight. They surface, and they sink. They do not need you. They are only the day settling itself, the mind sorting quietly through its warm gathered hours as it powers down, and you can watch them come and go from further and further away, more and more faintly, as the warm night rises around you and the bed cradles you and the rain goes on and on and on outside, until you are not quite sure any longer which of the soft images are memory and which have already become dream. There is, as it happens, one small stirring in the sleeping house, deep in that stillest hour, and it is the gentlest thing imaginable, and worth staying with for a moment before you go under yourself. Up in the nursery under the slates, one of the 2 little children stirs and half wakes. The younger one, roused by nothing more than a dream or the change in the rain, and gives a thin, uncertain cry into the dark. And before the cry has even properly gathered itself, before it can rise into real waking and real distress, the nurse is there, for she sleeps with her door ajar for exactly this, and wakes at the first note of it out of long habit, the way mothers and nurses have always woken. She comes through in the dim red glow of the banked nursery fire, and she bends over the little bed, and she does the oldest things there are, the things that need no learning, a hand laid on the child's back, a few low murmured words that mean nothing and everything, the covers drawn up, a moment of quiet steady presence in the dark beside the cot, and the child feeling her there, knowing without waking that the great warm reliable person who stands between it and every fear is near, lets go of whatever small trouble surfaced and rolls over and sinks back down into sleep before it ever quite left it. But the nurse stays a minute longer, until the breathing is deep and even again. Then she goes back to her own bed, and that is all. It is the least event of the whole night, unrecorded, unremembered, one child briefly comforted in the night by one tired woman, and it is also, in its way, the whole of what this home is for, the thing all the stone and the land and the servants and the centuries finally come down to, that when a child cries out in the night, someone who loves it is there in a moment, and the night is gentle again, and it can go back to sleep. Let your mind lift now, up and out, one last widening before you sink, up off the little bed in the nursery and the great bed where you lie, and out through the roof altogether, up above the sleeping slates into the wild wet air of the night, and feel for a moment how small and warm and precious a thing it is, this one lit point of shelter in the vast dark turning world. Up here above the chimneys the rain streams past on the wind, and below you the building sits square and solid and black in its ring of dripping trees, one dwelling, holding its handful of sleeping lives, and around it the parkland rolls away into the black, and beyond the park the fields and farms, and beyond them the sleeping county spread out under the same low cloud, and there is scarcely a light showing anywhere in all that dark expanse, only here and there the faint ember glow of a banked fire behind a curtained window, each one a house like this, each keeping its own small freight of sleepers through the night. And above it all, above the streaming cloud that hides them, the stars are wheeling in their slow enormous circle the way they have every night since, long before there were roofs or children or rain on any slate, and the great round ball of the earth is turning quietly through the night toward the morning, carrying all its millions of sleepers around with it into the light, and you among them, one warm mote of life on the turning world, held safe tonight in one old house, under one grey sky, in the falling rain. And the world does turn, even now, even in the deepest stillness, even when it seems most utterly to have stopped. The night has passed its lowest point without anyone marking the moment, the way a tide turns far out at sea with no one to see it. And now, though nothing yet shows it, the whole vast night has begun its long gradual tilt back toward the day. It will be hours yet before there is any sign. But the direction has changed. The bottom of the night is behind us now, and every minute from here, however imperceptibly, is a minute climbing back up toward the light. And the rain, which has fallen without pause since before the evening began, which has soaked the long night through, begins at last, so gradually that no ear could catch the moment to ease. The steady drumming on the slates grows a little less steady. The gutters, which have run full and loud for hours, begin to run quieter. The wind that drove the rain falls light, and then falls away to nothing, and the great soft roar in the trees sinks to a wet dripping and a stir, and the last of the cloud begins, high up and unseen, to thin and break and let the dark sky through. The storm has spent itself. It has given the thirsty land everything it carried, all that water drawn up off the far sea and carried all this way, and now it is done, and it is passing on east over the sleeping country, leaving behind it a world washed and dripping and still, tilting quietly on toward the dawn, long before there is any light in the sky, while everyone still sleeps and the rain has only just eased. The very first stirring of the new day begins, down at the bottom of the building, where the coldest and hardest work has always begun first. In her cold little garret under the slates, the youngest servant wakes in the pitch black to the sound of nothing at all. Wakes because her body has learned to wake at this hour whether she wills it or not, and lies for one moment in the last of her warmth before she must give it up. Then she rises in the freezing dark and dresses by feel, and goes down the back stairs with a candle into the dead cold kitchen, where the rain she banked a few hours ago still holds a sullen red heart under its ash. And she kneels to it, and rakes it, and feeds it, and coaxes the fire up again out of the embers she left it, the very same fire, never quite allowed to die, carried alive through the night from one day into the next. And the flames take, and the warmth begins once more to spread into the cold stone room, and the first kettle goes on, and the long-ordered day of the house, which we watched close down so carefully a few hours ago, quietly and invisibly begins its turning again, while everyone who will benefit from it lies still asleep upstairs in the dark. And gradually, out beyond the shuttered windows, the light comes back into the world. It comes so slowly that there is no moment you could point to and say that now it is here, only that the black of the sky, when the housemaid pauses at a landing window with her coal, has become the very deepest of greys, and then a lighter grey, and the shapes of the great trees in the park begin to come back out of the night, dripping and still, and a mist lies white and low over the wet grass and the lake. The rain has stopped. The clouds are breaking and moving off to the east, and low in that direction, along the rim of the hills, there is the first faint cold promise of colour, the palest wash of grey gold along the edge of the world where the sun, still well below it, is beginning to send its light on ahead, and into that returning grey, one by one, and then all together, the birds begin. First a single tentative call from somewhere in the wet shrubbery, and then another answering it. And then, as the day strengthens, the whole drenched garden and park lift up into that vast layered chorus of song that follows rain at daybreak, thrush and blackbird and robin and wren, the sound of a whole world washed clean and glad to see the light rising up around the sleeping walls. but you do not have to wake for it. That is the great mercy of the hour, lying where you lie. The dawn is coming, but it is not coming for you. Not yet, not for a long while. The birds are singing, but they are singing the house awake, not you, and their song reaches you only faintly through the shutters and the curtains and the deep, warm fathoms of your own sleep. A distant sweetness at the very edge of hearing that does not summon you up, but only tells you, without words, in the language the body understands beneath all thinking, that the night was safely crossed, that the rain is spent, that the morning has come, as it always comes, and that all is well. You can sink back down. The fire is lit again below, and the water is heating, and the day is being made ready for you by hands you never see, exactly as the evening was, and there is nothing you need do about any of it, but stay exactly where you are, warm and heavy and safe in the deepest part of the night's rest, and let the singing and the greying dawn and the whole waking world stay gently on the far side of sleep, where they cannot reach you, where nothing can reach you now, until you have had every last hour of rest that you need. For that, in the end, is the gift this old house has to give, the same gift it has given quietly to everyone who has ever slept beneath its roof, down all the long years, from the founder in his armour to the child asleep in the nursery tonight. Not its grandeur, and not its wealth, but this deep, guarded, complete safety in which to let go and be restored. All evening we moved through its warm rooms and watched its gentle ceremonies, the dressing and the dinner, the music and the cards, the tea and the prayers, the slow tender closing down of the day, and all of it, every part of it, was only ever the long approach to this. It's the moment when the last light is out and the last door is barred, and every soul the house holds lies down together in the dark, and gives itself up to sleep while the rain falls and the walls stand and the fires burn, low and faithful in the grates. That is the whole of it. That is what it is for. And tonight, for these few hours, it has been for you. So stay where you are now, warm and heavy and still, and let the last of it go. There is nothing left to look at, and nothing left to follow, and nowhere at all that you need to be. The great front door is barred against the night. The fires are keeping their low red watch in every grate. The family are asleep in their beds, and the servants at rest beneath the slates, and the little ones deep in the nursery, and the old woman at peace with her whole long century folded quietly away beside her. And out in the wet, the horses drowse in the warm stable, and the deer lie folded in the bracken, and the owl drifts silent over the streaming grounds, and the rain, which fell so long and so steadily all through the evening, has eased at last to the softest dripping from the eaves above you, off the roof of this old strong dwelling that has turned the weather aside for 200 years, and has turned it aside again tonight. You are safe here. You are always going to be safe here. That was the whole promise of it. From the moment the carriage came up the drive through the rain, and the door opened, and the warmth reached out to draw you in, and the promise has been honoured, as it is honoured every night, for everyone it gathers in. There is nothing more to do now but sleep. So let the rain take you, and the warmth take you, and the deep old quiet of these walls take you, and go down, gently, all the way down, into the soft and dreamless dark. Before you go all the way under, let me only say this, quietly, so as not to disturb the peace of it. If these quiet evenings are something you would like to return to, you are always one of us here, and there is a chair saved for you by the fire, so that when the cold months settle in, and you are looking for an old refuge to see you gently off to sleep, this one will be here, its lamps lit, and its door open, and a bed turned down. It has been a true pleasure to sit up with you through this evening together, out of the storm, in the warmth, while the world grew still and hushed around us. That is all. There is nothing else to hold to now, and nothing else to do. Sleep well, stay warm, be kind to the people in your house, and I will see you in the next one. Good night.